Alrighty, good evening. Welcome to the February 27th Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, we have a very exciting meeting and we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We have lots of guests here, but we'll start with a few announcements. Does anyone on the board have announcements this evening?
Sure. Am I on? I am. Good evening, everyone. So just being so cold outside, I have to remind everyone that we do have the Ossining Shelter Partnership, which is ongoing, and it's our temporary winter shelter. So anyone in need of shelter, all they have to do is go in front of Open Door Family Medical Center at 9 p.m. and a staff member and or volunteer will meet you there and take you to one of the host sites. Either if it's close, you'll walk to it, or you get bused. This is the program open to anyone in the village who needs a warm place to stay, and it's made possible by our houses of worship. So it's 9 o'clock Monday through Sunday in front of Open Door. And as I mentioned last week, there are still a few people who, for whatever reason, don't really know about the shelter or have some fear. So if you identify or see anyone as you walk throughout our village, seeing storage or bags or possibly even someone sleeping, please let us know. And we have a procedure to go about that. That's about it. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else with announcements? Okay, then I just have two quick ones. I'll put on my documentary and discussion series hat for a moment. Please join us at the Ossining Public Library at 6:30 p.m. on March 7th for our March offering, which is She's Beautiful When She's Angry. March is Women's History Month, so we tend to focus on women's issues in March. It's a really terrific panel discussion. To learn more about it, visit ossiningdocumentaries.org. As always, it is free to the public. And once again, that's Thursday, March 7th at 6:30 p.m. at the Ossining Library. And just 2 days after that, Green Ossining, the village actually co-sponsors this. It's the Repair Cafe. We were the first in Westchester. I think somebody else may have followed suit, but it happens every couple of months at the community center. If you have a beloved but broken item, bring it on down. Someone with the skills and the tools will help you fix it. It is an all-volunteer effort, and we are delighted that they are continuing to have success in our community. It's a wonderful way to further Green Ossining's mission of having less waste. It's something that we can save from going to landfill and have repaired and keep it going is being helpful to our community. So if you can join them on Saturday, March 9th, oh, I forgot to say the times, between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. at the community center. All right, Madam Manager.
All right. I'm very excited. So thank you very much. Today we are going to be talking about the village-owned properties. And I know that is something in my year and a half of being here that the village trustees, the board has talked about. What can we do with those? We've also talked about economic development, economic growth, and one of the biggest issues that we have in our community is housing. We have lots of housing studies. We're going to go through a little bit of that in our presentation, and I'm really excited to have quite a few guests. I want to thank Karen DeTore for bringing us all together and giving us sort of an opportunity to say there is some interest in some of our properties. So really, is it time to explore what those opportunities are, and is the board ready to move forward with some sort of action? So by the end of this presentation, hopefully you'll have a sense of what you want to do and how you want to move forward, and we can have a discussion at the end. I want to introduce Karen DeTore, who's here from IFCA, and she represents our affordable housing program. And I think you run a really amazing program, and I thank you for being a part of our community, and thank you for bringing this opportunity to us.
Thank you, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So we also have Darren Scott, and we have Maria Koulidis, both from New York State Housing and Community Renewal. They are going to be bringing us some ideas and opportunities that the state may have for investment in housing that we're interested in having. And then we're very happy to have Roseanne Noonan, who is from the Housing Action Council, and she's the executive director, and she's a potential partner with us to help us maybe further our projects. And so at a point in this presentation, we'll be hearing from all of them, and we're really excited to have them. I'd like to recognize Catherine Borgia, who is our county legislator in the audience, to support this action, and also Andrew Ferris, who's the Chief of Staff for the County Executive. I want to thank him for taking the time to come here and show his support. And if there's any questions, they're certainly here to answer anything related to the county and how the county can support us as well. So turning this. So I'm not really sure how you want to do this.
We can get started with it, and some of us can
Okay.
move out of the way, and we'll all take a look, and then come
Okay.
back to our seats and have a conversation afterwards, right?
Okay. I think, yeah, I'm just sort of, I'm hesitating only because some of the times we're going to stop on those screens and, you know, and have conversation at that point.
We'll step up to the microphone.
Okay, great. All right. So I do want to go over some of the goals for today. Thank you. So we've outlined some of the goals so that we can target our discussions around relevant issues, and hopefully if we go off on tangents, we can make a record of what those discussions might be. We put it in what, you know, we all call parking lots, no pun intended, but, you know, we just want to stay on target. So really it's to discuss the board's readiness to use the village-owned properties and how that looks and what is the creation of affordable housing economic growth. How does using our properties facilitate that discussion in our community? We are going to go over some of the sites that the village owns so everyone can understand exactly what it is that the village does have down near the waterfront, around the downtown area. We want to understand the state programs that we can use or tap into for incentives for mixed use and affordable mixed use, mixed income development. We want to hear from our potential partners today on ways that we could build affordable housing and attract interest from developers, and then talk about our next steps. I've introduced our guest. Housing needs assessment. This community has been doing housing needs assessments for many, many years. So I think we're done assessing and we're ready to build. We're ready to take action. And we have our Patterns for Progress, Connect the Dots, which was done last year. We have our Downtown Revitalization Worker Committee Downtown Revitalization Plan that talks about housing in 2017. We have Kevin Dworka's Housing Needs Assessment in 17. We had a Main Street Improvement Study done in 2016 and a Market Square Post Office study to see if housing could be built in the downtown to rebuild what was removed during the 70s. Urban renewals in the 70s. Yeah, in 15. So I really think that the community is done planning. It's time to take action. Just to reiterate some of the key points in the Downtown Working Committee. The first one was to create connections between the waterfront and the center of downtown. So the parcel that we have selected actually helps us make that connection potentially. And then it goes through some other things, parcels at Main and Spring, and examining our zoning and things like that that we know we're going to have to address. But the key part of this was actually the very first initiative identified by the DRWC, and that was to make those connections and look at ways that we could expand economic development and housing at the same time. Our housing needs assessment, the Kevin Dworka report. Number 4 was expand the village's network of local housing developers. Number 6, to eliminate regulatory barriers to housing development. But again, this was heavily weighted towards how we grow economically and build the affordability housing that we need in our community. So what are the properties that the village owns? Down at the waterfront, which you'll see in a map shortly, is the DPW equipment and storage lot, which is along the Sing Sing Kill, and I spelled kill wrong, at Water Street. We own the parking and vacant land between Main Street and Secor Road. We own an old, the site of the old sewer plant on North Water Street. And then we own most of the train station parking down there. The Metro North owns a small piece of that, but not enough to be of significance. Primary downtown properties is we have our historic bank building at 200 Main Street. Although that's not a vacant parcel, it is a parcel that the village owns, and we would love to see that revitalized and turned into an economic engine for our downtown. We have our Market Square community gathering location and the Main and Spring Street parking lots. They're adjacent to the post office, and that is where urban renewal came and took out the old buildings. And so could we rebuild that in a way that makes sense for our community? So this is a map. I'm not sure how well you can see this in the back. The parcel that we're talking about right now, it's not even, you're not going to be able to see it. It's number 12. It's in the middle. It's the largest of the parcels that we have, and it's the one that has the least restrictions on it. Most of the other ones have parking. And so parking is a huge issue for our community. We're still having discussions about how much additional, do we decrease it, what happens. And so in order for development to occur on some of the other parcels, we would have to relocate parking. And that's not going to be an easy problem to solve. Number 12 there, which is in the middle. I don't know. Can you be my Vanna White? Point to where we're at. So number 12. Yes. So that's the Water Street exit. And then at the top is the top of Main Street. So this connects both of those, the lower area and the upper area. Thank you, Omar. That's why we selected this one. It really lends itself to having the most opportunity for development in a way that isn't going to displace parking. Now I will say, and we'll go through some of the limitations of this site that I think everyone needs to understand as we move forward. But I think that's really a key spot for us.
Debbie, I'm looking at mine because I'm trying to see if there's, so the legend, there are numbers on here. What's the numbers for? Because it's not on the legend, like 1 through 12? What is that?
It's just, they're just the number of the lots.
Okay.
There's 12 lots, or there's more than, yeah. Yeah. So this is a larger picture of the site itself. It is 3.23 acres in total. However, it is split by the Sing Sing Kill Riverway there. So there's theoretically on the north side, Central Avenue side, there's about 1 acre of developable land. And on the south side where it says DPW site, there's about 2 acres. So it's not quite as big as it sounds when you say we have 3 acres. And this is an old picture I just want to point out. So there are some buildings that are on here that no longer exist on the site. They're gone. This is a picture of the slopes. And I think this is a key factor in determining how steep it is. It's rock ledge, but it does provide access to Upper Main Street. And so in talking with our engineering department, there are ways to build into ledge. And so even though it is very steep in this location, it's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on how development could occur here. One of the things is that we do use this for materials and storage currently for the village. And so if we are to vacate this property, we will have to find an alternate location for all of those materials and that material storage. This is also an environmental remediation project for Con Edison. So they are currently under court order to remediate this if and when any development occurs on this site. It is their responsibility to do so, but it has to be factored into the timing of development on this project because I'm not exactly sure how you would mobilize Con Edison to do that project, but it is there. If you see on the south side, there's a jog in the white area. That is actually the oldest residential property in Ossining. It's a piece of property where I think a lot of people have said, wow, I wish I could do something. The views would be awesome and things like that. But it does dip into the site a little bit. And so it's something to be considered when you decide if you want to do something here or not. There is a small additional corner lot at Main and Water Street, which is just down at the very corner where the yellow cuts off a little bit. The owner of that property has indicated that they may be willing to sell their property. They're ready to retire and move on, and so that might be just another additional parcel, if you will. So stormwater infrastructure and the trailway. So this parcel was designated as part of the Sing Sing Kill Trailway that has not yet been built. And so there is a plan to go under Central Avenue and connect here so that part of that could become a park, if you will. But we want to be able to have people at the community center get on that walkway and be able to walk all the way down to Water Street. And so that's a plan that's in place that I think the village is still pretty passionate about completing. Now this is the floodplain map, and so that is something else that a developer is going to have to be concerned about, based on the height of their building and what other factors they're going to have to consider on the site. But if you look at the floodplain and then you go back, to the topographic, you can see that, there's a few things that are in play regarding this site. I'm going to ask Karen Dottori to speak now, talking about the need for affordable housing, which has already been established, and how mixed use and income developments can be economic drivers for our community. Maybe talk a little bit about the community interest that you've seen so far from developers and potential partnerships. So Karen, if you would, thank you.
This is on. Okay, I think that we all know that we have a well-established need for affordable housing, not only here in Ossining, but throughout the county and probably the whole country. Some of the projects that are available to us really are more dynamic than what we have historically thought of when we thought of affordable housing. So you're talking about mixed use, meaning that you have residential and some commercial or community-oriented space, as well as mixed income. So the income ranges can be from very low income to market rate or close to market rate, depending on which project tax credit model you use. And the reason that this is important, because it's not just about housing for housing's sake. It really can be a tremendous economic driver, because what you're talking about, particularly in this area, it's an area that we all in Ossining know pretty well. It's right now it's been being used as DPW site for as long as I can remember, and maybe a little bit longer than that. You have some new businesses that are taking root down there, service business as well as restaurants and things like that. You still have some distressed housing, some abandoned housing, and this is a really important link from the riverfront to Main Street, and it requires some attention. So the idea of doing something down here that would provide a range of affordability, that would create some commercial benefits, could really catalyze growth throughout that whole area, and then also really create the link that we need between the riverfront and Main Street that would drive traffic up the hill and down the hill with stops along the way. So there's so much potential here. We have the train right there, so this is great transit-oriented housing. We have the riverfront right there, so there's opportunities for recreation. There's a lot of really big pluses here. Plus, there's an opportunity to revitalize an area, but do so in a way that we're not gentrifying and moving people out, because we do have this opportunity to preserve affordability. So all that combined creates a very attractive opportunity. And we have noted that other people think it's attractive too. So we've talked to developers have talked to us. We've been working with our friends at Homes and Community Renewal. We've talked to different developers, not just the site, but just developing in Ossining overall. There is real interest here. And we also have partners for development too. So we have a range of nonprofit groups in Ossining that can contribute to partnerships. We have other things that I think that this conversation really opens up the dialogue of what could be, because the potential is significant. We have a community health center that's interested in doing social enterprise projects that are centered around health and nutrition and well-being. We have a range of other options, and we know that we have a need for job training, for youth programs, for any number of programs that would benefit communities. So they would benefit tenants within the building as well as the broader community, and they'd work in concert to our overall housing and economic development goals.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like to ask Darren and Maria to talk a little bit about funding opportunities, partnerships, the things that the state can offer us, and thank you again both for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
If it's up, it's on. Yeah.
No, it's on.
On
Now
now.
it's on.
Okay, got it. All right, pass the test. So thank you for inviting us. I have some prepared remarks, and then hopefully we can have a dialogue. But again, thank you for inviting us. From what I have seen of Ossining, and I've been working down here for about 2 years now, you have the will. You've identified the need for affordable housing. You have the will. That's more than half the battle, really. So you're already ahead of a lot of other communities in realizing that you need to work on some solutions. You've done the planning, which is really good to see. A lot of planning, as a matter of fact. And you have a strong housing provider in your community, which is always a help in trying to get efforts like this going. So I have some prepared remarks, as I said, and then hopefully we can have a dialogue. This is a short amount of time to digest a lot of information, and so just be assured that Maria and I are only a train ride away or a car ride away, and we're happy to come back. So I'm going to give you the 30,000-foot view of HCR and what we do. And then we can talk about some of the specifics about the site. So HCR is the state's clearinghouse for housing finance. We are a brick and mortar finance agency. We're not service providers. We are not. We build buildings. We finance the building of buildings for affordable housing and related uses. We have funding priorities that shape how we use our money. We make our funds available through RFPs, requests for proposals, similar to what you'll be talking about tonight, where we set forth the state's priorities as we see them, and we try to offer a menu of funding that allows communities to tailor these state housing goals, these state funding to meet the needs of your own community. We don't build anything, though. We rely on a network, a community of private and nonprofit developers to carry out that mission. And the way it works is we, as I said, state the housing goals within the funding RFPs, and then we have developers respond to that. And in one case, which I'll talk about, one of the funding streams is unified funding. It's a competitive process. We review last year 93 applications. In another path is open window, where that's a come as you're ready sort of path. And through these, we incentivize the development of affordable housing through that for-profit and nonprofit development community. And as Karen was saying, we like to see our housing investment go into a neighborhood where it's going to catalyze additional private investment. There's only so much public funding to go around, and really that needs to be used wisely in order to spur private investment and revitalization of neighborhoods. So the two funding paths I was talking about, we're going to be talking about multifamily tonight. The two primary funding paths, they both use tax credits as the base layer of a capital stack. These projects aren't funded through one source. You need to layer resources in order to build up enough money in your budget in order to actually do the project. HCR, we finance most of it, but we always like to see local skin in the game. It doesn't always have to be a financial contribution, but that does help. So the tax credits form the base layer of the capital stack, and then we have different capital subsidy programs that allow you to tailor the project to your community's needs. So we have different types of populations that need affordable housing, seniors, families, supportive housing, and at various income levels. I like to say from 30% of the area median income up to 130% of the area median income. And that's a pretty wide band. We like to see mixed income developments that reflect the needs of the community. So we're not talking about the affordable housing of the 60s and 70s, where that was, I guess you could call it a warehousing of the poor. We're talking about building housing that reflects the surrounding community, has some very low income or very affordable or deeply affordable units. We have some middle, and then we have some higher income. So the two primary paths, I mentioned the open window. This is 4% tax credits as that base layer. These tend to be the projects that this funding is used for tends to be the larger size projects of 80 plus units. It can go up into a couple of hundred units. It all depends on the financing that's involved and the site factors and the market. We're always looking to make sure that there's the demand in the market for the number of units that are being financed. The 4% path, the open window path, tends to work best in high rent markets that can support, that generate more rent, that can support more debt, and often use historic rehab and adaptive reuse buildings in qualified census tracts, which gives you a boost in the financing. The affordability of this type of project is at least 50% of the units at below 60% of the area median income. The subsidies that I mentioned can allow the other units to be up to 90% of the area median income, up to 130% of the area median income. But basically, all the units, and there can be market rate units, which in the way I'm talking about it, market rate means that there's no income limit on those units. But most of the units will have an income limit, and that those income limits vary per apartment according to the funding source that you've chosen for the project. The other primary funding path is unified funding. This is a competitive process held once a year, and it's actually a series of deadlines at the end of each year. The first deadline is usually the first week in October, and that is for early round projects that meet state housing goals and have a high degree of readiness, meaning that the project is ready to close on its construction financing and be under construction within 120 days of award. So that's very aggressive. It's really meant for those few projects that are just ready to go and have a high degree of readiness and are really meeting those state housing goals. The second deadline is for supportive housing early round projects. And then the regular round in December is for when we get the bulk of the applications, and that really rounds out the round. So this, as I said, this is a competitive process. Projects or applicants are competing against other projects within their region. So we're in the Mid-Hudson region. So I think last year we got 7 applications from the Mid-Hudson. Those projects are competing against each other. There's an eligibility and scoring process, And then all the projects within the state are competing for a finite amount of funds within that funding round. So to give you an idea, there were 93 applications received statewide last year. 10 of those came in the early round. So it really benefits you to try to shape your RFP or your RFQ and the concept of this project around the idea of meeting the state housing goals and provide as great a degree of readiness as possible, because that really gives you an advantage to getting funded, because the competition within your REDC region and even statewide is much, much less than the regular round. And I said we got 93 in the regular round. The size of the project, these are medium-sized projects. In our view, they're average around 60 units. They can be less, they can be more. Again, it depends on the financing and other factors. And these projects are the size that would attract a tax credit investor. The affordability is either at either 40% of the units at or below 60% of the area median income, or 20% at or below 50% of the area median income. But the fact of the matter is most applications that come in for this funding tend to be mostly at or below 60% of the area median income, because the tax credit equity is such a rich source that it needs to be spread across all the units or most of the units in order to make the project work. Still, you can use the subsidies, layer those subsidies on top of those tax credits in order to create different income bands within that same project. So you can have a segment of units between 60 and 90% of the area median income, and you can have some that go up to 130% of the area median income. Not really relevant to the site we're talking about tonight, I believe, but we also, within this funding path, can fund smaller projects of around 20 units. We call these subsidy standalone projects, where they're not using the tax credits, but there might be a site where that can accommodate 20 units, and that's the right size for that site. Or in some more rural locations, we often see that 20 units is just enough to satisfy all their affordable housing needs, and so that's an option. I want to mention that we don't do just housing. We also have a funding source that can be applied for within either of those two funding paths, called the Community Investment Fund, which can fund non-residential space that complements the affordable residential project. Housing alone does not revitalize neighborhoods. It's an essential part of it, but we like to invest in neighborhoods that are going to be well-rounded and attract people of all incomes. And so the Community Investment Fund, you can apply for up to $2 million per project to help build space for a use that is not naturally going to come to that neighborhood. A market rate use, it could be service providers, it could be, we're doing a Boys and Girls Club right now. We're doing a theater in another locality. It can be educational, where we've done a Meals on Wheels kitchen. It's basically look around what's missing from the community that you need in the community to make it, to increase the quality of life for the residents of the project, and also because it's within a broader community of those folks who are living in that neighborhood. I just want to briefly outline some of the state housing goals that I think you'll want to take into consideration. So on the 9% unified funding side, there's a category called revitalization and economic development goals. There are a few goals, some of that I think pertain to what we're talking about tonight. Our priority projects identified by the regional economic development plans. So like we want to see our investment in a neighborhood where there's other investments in a locality that supports the housing investment. We also want the project to resonate on a regional level too. So the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council, has a set of priorities, and housing projects that receive funding through that process and are identified as priority projects are high on our list for wanting to be funded. Mixed income, mixed use revitalization. So these are applications, obviously, as the name implies, there's a range of incomes within the residential portion, and there's a non-residential component to the project. So these projects, we're looking for the use or adaptive use of existing underutilized buildings, infill construction, and or the demolition and replacement of buildings that have a blighting impact on a community and for which rehabilitation is impracticable. So that's a good point, in that we not only use this funding to develop the housing that's needed, but we also try to use it to help localities solve problems that they can't otherwise. So we do develop on brownfields, and we do want to see blighting, vacant, abandoned buildings, so forth, either rehabbed or taken down and new construction fill their place. We have a couple of workforce opportunity goals. One is a housing opportunity projects. These are projects located in localities that have a low rate of poverty and high performing schools. These are family projects of an average of 2 bedrooms or more. And we have a transit-oriented development category, which kind of speaks for itself. On the 4% side, this is the open window, apply when you're ready path. The priorities for funding are, community renewal and revitalization projects. There's a lot of similarities to both sides. Housing opportunity projects, workforce opportunity projects, economic development projects, mixed income revitalization projects. So really there's a lot of commonality, and it depends on the type of project that you want to develop as a community, and that's probably the most important thing. That's the starting point. What do you want? What fits in your community? And then work with the state and the developer community to try to figure out how to finance it. I'm going to avoid getting into the weeds too much, because there is scoring criteria around the kind of sites that we prefer, around the type of projects that we prefer, nonprofit participation, the participation of minority and women-owned businesses, etc. We're trying to use the housing investment as a vehicle to address a lot of other things that are happening in the community, provide economic opportunities. I think what I'm going to do is stop there, and if you'd like, we can talk about some specifics about the site and other considerations you might want to take into account in putting together your RFQ. I want to offer Maria an opportunity to speak if you want.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
So I'm here for questions as well. All right. So I think we'll hold questions till the end so that the board can get back to their seats. But thank you so much. I mean, you're right. That's a lot of information. It's a lot to digest, and there may be people watching this or in the audience that have a much firmer grip on what that all means. But it's really great to have the state as a partner to help our communities revitalize themselves and to work with, our nonprofits. And I think it's a great opportunity for us. So we'll move on in our discussion. I'd like to introduce Rose Noonan. I've asked Rose if she would talk a little bit about the difference between an RFP and an RFQ, maybe talk about some timelines and the selection process, next steps, or whatever else you want to share with us, Rose. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you, and I'm happy to be here. I just want to give a brief background on Housing Action Council for those who are not aware of the Housing Action Council. We are a nonprofit organization. We're based in Tarrytown. We have a long time history of working with other nonprofits, with developers, with the state agency, and working on developing programs, developing housing developments, and so forth. And I am very familiar with the village. Great place to eat, particularly. That's what I found out recently. So I probably am going to raise a lot issues. I think what we've just heard is that we know there's a need, as Karen pointed out. And I would endorse that many times over. That there is possibly a potential for the development of one or more sites in the village for affordable workforce housing, and that there's funding available through a variety of approaches to the state. And I also don't want to forget the county, who's here who participate in many of the developments. And I think the challenge, as we all sit here, is how do we get from here to there? Importantly, I think we know that state funding in particular, needs to be part of this development to create affordable housing. We've heard some of the state housing policies and the competitiveness and when you're ready approach. And we also have heard, when you started out, Deborah, in terms of what the local goals are. So I think it's very important, whether we look at the approach for a request for proposals or a request for qualifications, that as a community, that you make it clear to potential developers what you're looking for. With some caveats there is that you also want them to give you ideas, but in the end, you want your goals to be the ones that are achieved and to meet the needs of this community. So I think whether it's a request for proposals, and I will talk about briefly the differences, the request for qualifications, in either of those, what are the goals that you're trying to achieve? And be as expansive and as concrete as you can when you're putting that out. With the request for qualifications, if you're if you feel that it's important to get to know developers, whether it be nonprofits or for-profit developers or a combination thereof, a request could go out asking them about their development experience, their development in affordable housing, how they might approach something, and ask for conceptual approaches to the development of perhaps the Water Street site or any other site that you decide upon. You're going to get back more general information rather than very specific information or concepts for the one that you're looking at. Listening to what you've said about the site and the analysis that you've done already and the knowledge that you have for your community, a request for proposal may be the right approach for now. Again, in that request for proposals, who do you want to be your target population or populations in terms of you're putting it in? We heard about mixed income, mixed use. How important is that to you as a community? I hear as we're talking generally that it's very important. How does it mesh with the state goals? Because we always want to look at, can we make this work financially? In the end, the bottom line is, can it work financially and achieve the goals? And achieve the goals that you want to. Not all concepts, not all great ideas can be feasible. And I think that given the site, what you've said about zoning, its site condition, that perhaps internally, that you can do sort of a quick and dirty on determining whether something is feasible or not. And review that among yourselves as you try to direct the type of request for proposal that you receive. Now, in a request for proposals, you receive all the developers' qualifications. You will, and they're probably their development team. You want to ask them about that. You want to get them their concept for the site, and when you see that, are they addressing the goals that you've laid out? Are they using the information that you've provided? And how would they approach it in taking the next step forward? Now, are they coming in with a 50 unit projection, or are they coming in with a 100 unit projection? How mixed income is it? We heard Darren talk about possibilities between 30 and 130% of median, but at the same time, maybe some of those units are going to be market, meaning that there's no income restriction whatsoever to them. But by doing your own internal analysis first, which I think can be done pretty quickly, you can use that as a tool to measure the various proposals that come in, and hopefully enough proposals come in that you can really evaluate them, compare them, and see what best meets your needs. You know, with state funding, as with county funding, you're always trying to put the best development that you can in. The late fall deadlines that you mentioned are very competitive. Can you get there if you're thinking of at the end of the year? Can you get there from here to now? I think it would be very hard to have to submit an early round application at this stage. As I think you said, 10 of the 93 were early round, and they've got to be ready to go within 120 days of the award commitment. So that you would have to have all your local approvals in place, and the developer would have to have his or her financing in place and be ready to go. So I don't think we'd be looking at that. We'd be looking. Would you like to say something?
I think Darren would maybe agree with me that we often encourage people with their proposals to take the extra time. Like, don't just try to submit it early, because you know that by submitting it early, there's less competition. It's better to have a more full, comprehensive proposal, and so take
Right.
that extra time.
Yeah.
Put it forth in the regular round.
You know, how quickly does the community want to move forward? I think that's a question that you need to examine internally too. But in terms of the most immediate funding round at the state level, you're talking for competitive funding, which is the richest funding, and that the development may need that. You're talking toward the end of the year, and you might not be able to reach that time period. But you might. I'm just saying you may be able to, but you may not be able to at the same time. And so I'm hoping that gives you some difference between the request for proposals. Are you some things need to think about are you inviting you select, and this is probably a legal question, so do you need to invite, because it's a village-owned property, do you need to open it up to everyone? Could there be some pre-qualification of developers and invite them to submit? You know, from a developer's perspective, the fewer that you invite, the more work that they're going to be. I mean, this is a generalization, but generally the more work they are willing to put in, because they're going to have a bit better chance of being selected with the fewest number of developers submitting. So there could be like an initial screening process, but if you have to legally open it up through a publication, you know, in the newspaper and so forth, you may get a lot of proposals, and I think you would hope to. If you don't, you may think that your analysis of whether this is feasible or not could be somewhat questionable. The timelines for producing an RFP, so that's as long as in the community, when I'm talking about the community, I'm talking about the municipality in conjunction with its partners, such as IFCA, is if you can agree that you want to put out the request for proposal and that you have your goal set and you know what you're looking for and you do that quick and dirty analysis of the feasibility of it, and that can be done quickly. I think the RFP can go out quickly. I think you need a 6-week, 4 to 6 week turnaround. And then there's an evaluation depending on how many come in. And that generally involves reviewing in detail what's been submitted, also interviewing several of the developers that have submitted proposals, and then coming to an agreement that you're going to work with a particular developer. And then sort of the next phase of the work begins of where the developer is really going to fine-tune what he or she can do for the community and mesh it with your goals, with you working hand in hand with that developer. And how quickly that goes will depend on whether a proposal for funding could go in this year or in subsequent years. So hopefully that's helpful a little bit.
Wow. Thank you so much. Okay, thanks so much, you guys. Brain overload here. No, that was really helpful, and I did appreciate the analysis between the RFP and the RFQ. It definitely, there's pros and cons to doing it both ways. I do like what you said about a selected group so that they'll, we know that there's real interest there. That sounds really nice. I'm not sure legally. We'll have to talk about that later and at the request of the board. At this point, I'd like to invite the mayor and everybody back to their seats because that's really, it's just time for discussion and questions. And again, I want to thank our guests for being here and sharing so much information with us. And I know that's a lot for everybody here to think about and digest. So I look forward to your feedback.
I'm sure there's lots of questions. So who wants to go first?
If you don't mind, I will. I just at 30,000 fee. Thank you for coming in. By the way, I don't want to go into the weeds. It's going to take way too long. But Darren and I guess Maria, both of you. So I was really interested in the idea that you talked about layering because it sort of set off my brain about how mortgages are done and all that. So I would have thought you look at a portfolio so that if one piece of the pie doesn't work with an investor, you could substitute different investors. But when you do layering, does that imply, or am I being too literal, that if the first layer doesn't work, everything else falls? Whereas in a portfolio of mortgages, when you do portfolio management, you can take a piece of the pie out and find a substitute and still move forward with a project. So I found it interesting that you talk about layering. Am I being too literal, or is it just or is it literally like if the second level doesn't work, level 4, 5, and 6 collapses?
The whole project, we do our best to ask for as much information that will give us the greatest amount of certainty that the project that we fund is going to be successful. The developer has a like interest in that because they don't want to be a part of a project that fails. As do the investors in a project. You've got a lot of eyes on a project during the development phase and then also in the management phase. Everybody wants to see this as a success because there's a lot of money involved, public and private, mostly private, in fact, through the tax credits. So it's, while up front, it's sort of a mix and match to make the project that you envision is best for your community. Once you've locked that down, that's the project that you're going to go forward with, and it either works or it doesn't. I would say it has a high probability of working because of all those the tests that it has to go through and all those different parties looking at the financing and how the project is put together. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, because I was just surprised at the layering part. So you're basically arguing for the point that by the time you get to all those layers, there are so many pieces to it that no layer is going to fall and drop everything else. It's
Oh,
That's what I was
and,
gonna
and
say,
market
too.
studies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, also, as you're putting it together, you have different levers,
Okay.
different subsidies, and different things that you're sort of looking at when you're putting together that financing plan. So hopefully, when you get to that last stage, you've built a solid foundation so that it's not there isn't one. There's some
and
flexibility, I guess I'm saying,
Okay.
before you get to that point.
and the other sort of more high level question I had, without digging deeper, is the difference. You interchange the word community and region in the conversation. You may have not, but at least I heard it that way, because everybody hears things the way they want to hear it. So it's not interchangeable. The region is the Mid-Hudson area, and the community is the village of Ossining. Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
So the issues are kind of scalable. You have site, neighborhood, village, county, region. And we like to see, common threads of planning, priorities through each that, are consistent through each of those layers. So we know everybody is in coordination with one another. That lends itself to the high probability that the project is going to be a success. We want to see the locality and, the county and the region have skin in the game, because that tells us that it's the priority has been, the need has been identified, and you're going to help see it through. You're going to be a partner in seeing it through to a success.
And lastly, I think I said two, but I'm going to go for one more. I'm very interested in your use of some of those organizations like Meals on Wheels and education and kitchens and all that, versus just usually people think of retail stores on the first floor or parking, if that's needed. That's a part of this layering too, or that's sort of a separate piece that comes from a different stream altogether?
That's a financial source that you can ask for when you're applying for the housing resources. It's called the Rural and Urban Community Investment Fund,
Okay.
and it's specifically meant to bring in those non-residential uses to help round out the community. Again, housing, affordable housing, any kind of housing is one facet of community revitalization, and often there are other things that are needed in that community. So it's really up to you to get creative. Again, look around your community. What is missing that could really, that wouldn't locate itself there naturally because it's too risky, the real estate cost is too high, any number of factors, and you can help incentivize that by helping to finance the construction of the space. And that will enable you to provide that space at a below market rent or for free to that use that you want in the neighborhood.
So another taxing municipality like our school system, which is another taxing entity, I have a great desire to help them with some of their issues, which is part of this community, and create either, space makers or workspace for them, or intergenerational education, or just pure space because they're renting for it. Does that fall in that, or because they're another taxing entity? Not really?
I think it could.
Okay.
I don't think we would be as excited about developing office space, but we need to make a link to the residents of that development and the neighborhood. So the more direct a connection we can make to how it improves the quality of life for those residents, the more we're going to be interested in that proposed use.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up, if I may, at this time. So we have talked about a youth center for a while here, but does it have to be something that's actually on the property, or can it be associated with the property but to serve the whole community, like a
It
youth
can
center?
be It can be within the same building, it can be on the same property in a separate building, or it can be on an adjacent property or within, I think, reasonable proximity to the residential part of the project.
Okay.
Again, we're trying to be flexible
Mhm.
because every community is different. Um, and again, I think you come back to tell us the story about how it improves the quality of life for the residents, and will they be able to access that both physically, so it's not too far away, and also is it affordable to them to access those services or whatever the use is.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to piggyback. We were talking about this community space. Now, that money would come out of the community investment fund,
Yes.
and that would be a max of $2 million. Okay.
Project.
So you were talking about the base layer of funding, which would be would that be the low income tax credits?
Yes.
That'd be low income and state.
Yeah, it can be also the state low-income housing tax credit,
Okay.
which, as opposed to the federal tax credit, which is at 60% of the area median income, the state low-income housing tax credit can go up to 90% of
Okay.
the MI. But yes,
And so, with respects to your workforce, you had mentioned that if the community has low poverty rate and good schools, you could see units like 2 and 3 bedrooms. What kind of data do you use to determine poverty rates in good schools?
there's a community assessment. I'm not going to remember it off the top of my head. Let me see if I can quickly grab it. And by the way, as I said in the beginning, this is a conversation starter. We can always follow up with additional information, even sample RFQs from other communities, if that would be helpful. American Community Survey.
Okay. And I think that's. I had one more question, but
Sure.
Others?
Well, good evening. Darren, Maria, where's my little seating chart? Rose, Karen, and partners, thank you so much for being here. This is a great, I think, first initial conversation. And also Debbie and Tracy for putting together our presentation and really giving the board and the public an overall view as to where we are with the properties that we own and the potential for them. So just thank you. This is, has taken a lot of conversation and prep work just for this one meeting. So I just wanted to say thank you. So I broke this down into need, which we've already have and established, the number of overall properties that the village owns, the fact that it's public property, priority determination, connection to downtown, and workforce. So I guess the question that stuck with me as for our next steps, just internally, really, I mean, as a board, is, what are the main goals that the village is trying to achieve when it comes to, are we going to, break that down into each property based off of its ability or potential for particular projects, and what we already have is, which, this would be another addition to it, is, are the current connections to our waterfront district, right? So we have our industrial parks, right? So we have Metcar and Riverkeeper, right? So you already have a mixed use space of office space, professional space, industrial, right? Then we have Lower Main Street, which is now more of a restaurant, entertainment, small little district, right? And then you have the Westerly Marina and Chathamack and Boathouse, which is kind of Boat and Canoe Club. So it's, those are already established. So it's great to kind of build more anchors to really connect it more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important for the public to know that we're not just doing it from scratch. We're kind of complementing what we have there already, which I think is pretty important. The only, I guess, question I kind of have is, for us, you don't have to answer this, by the way, this is not towards you, is how we determine the priority determination as to which property goes first, right? So I've been a pretty vocal critic and advocate for 200 Main Street, a building that we own, and that we're kind of having a discussion on the board now as to what is its future, right? We temporarily canceled funding until we have an actual idea as to what to do with that building, right? We also have the Main Street and Market Square parking lots that taxpayers have paid for multiple studies, right? So should those be in the conversation to be out developed first? Should those be in conjunction with this RFQ? You know, so because we have so many properties that have been studied, and we do know what can be built there because we actually paid to get a study to actually tell us what a developer can build on in the many parcels in the heart of our downtown that have been vacant because of urban renewal. So how does that connect? How do we determine a priority? And also, if we already have properties that have been studied and we already know our land use restrictions and or potential, where does that come into the line as far as our timeline? And also, especially if we're trying to, which we are on this board, trying to have a project that potentially is an affordable housing project that requires the help of, you know, safety net organizations, the state, and other entities, right? So that was just a thought that I had. And then how do we go about the public input about public property and its use outside of this board, right? So when does that process start? What does that even look like?
If I may,
Sure.
I think that process has already started from what I see. You know, there's been a lot of planning, and now it's time for action, for implementation of those plans. You may disagree. It's an ongoing dialogue in my experience, but at some point it's pencils down. You have to get started on something. And to your one other point in there, I don't know how you as a community decide which parcel goes first. I think you have the option of doing one or bundling a couple of sites. I would suggest not making it too complicated the first time around so that you can get a success under your belt. And you can point to that and say, this is a success story for the village. We worked together. We followed the steps of planning. And then through implementation, we made a good partnership, selection and partnership with a developer partner. And this, you know, we have something to point to. And then that, I'm sure, will be a learning experience for you. And then you can take that, and sort of selfishly speaking, but I think that you're going to need additional affordable housing. And I want your first project to be a success and to be what you want it to be.
Yeah, so there was definitely a clear list of funding sources that you didn't go over. My question is about SHOP, the supportive housing. Can you explain exactly what that is? I do know that sometimes it provides supportive housing. There might be some Medicaid dollars, but when we're thinking about lower levels of affordability, is that possibly something that could also be layered into the equation when we're thinking about, you know, that particular population at the 30% level, or even senior housing? Or
So SHOP, or the Supportive Housing Opportunity Program, is one of those subsidies that are used for projects that are considered supportive housing. And when I say that, these are projects that have a minimum of 30% of the units set aside for a supportive population, or they can go up to 50% of the units set aside for a supportive population, and the balance of the units would be regular affordable. So the purpose here is to provide housing in an integrated setting for folks who historically have been institutionalized or have been living out in the community in substandard housing without the services that they need in order to live independently. And so, and this covers a range of populations, serious mental illness. There can be, and these are all homeless populations, by the way, veterans, frail elderly. So, and you can have one population within a development, or you can have a blend of populations. The more you blend it, the more difficult it is, because you have to have a key component to all of this is having the services that are right for that population. And another key component is that because they come from a homeless situation and they tend to be lower income, even without a job, they're going to need a housing subsidy. And so through a separate initiative, the governor's made available the Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, and that provides a rental subsidy and a subsidy that pays for the supportive services. Again, these are on-site services that address the needs of that supportive population and allows them to live in an integrated setting along with everybody else.
Just a follow-up question: if there seems to be a need within the county or the region, would that be looked upon favorably if this particular project decides to serve that particular population?
If that's what your community has identified as a need, then I would say yes.
Yeah, sure, Manny, please go ahead.
Thank you for actually coming here tonight. Karen, thank you so much for bringing this to our work session. So I have more like general questions to Darren. You were talking about the funding, the United funding itself. So I went to the website for the state homes and community renewals. They have a list of different communities that have been awarded for this. I'm not sure if this is the latest one, but the last one that they have here is 2017. I'm not sure if it was anything in 2018 or not. It may have been or not. But what I have noticed in here is nothing in Westchester, at least in 2017. Is any other community that you know of that has used this particular programs?
In the 2017 round, I think we did make 2 awards. One was Hillcrest Commons in Putnam. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not in the county.
So what you're saying is you have a need for a project in Westchester.
We do.
Well, we do.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
was-
Maria, who covers our region, thank you.
That was
We have
that was
We have very few proposals that have come from Westchester,
Yeah,
I would
Lewisboro
say, so
is
that's why
another,
there hasn't
and
been
I
that
think
many
that is in
awarded,
Westchester.
right?
again, and
Lewisboro
that
is
was
Westchester.
that's what my
But
that's
there's
my question.
definitely a
Yes.
desire to have more proposals
Right.
from Westchester.
And again that was leading to what my sort of second question. So and I think this is a very exciting particular time and project that I will definitely be in supported if we can accomplish that goal and be part of this list as the first ones in Westchester County, so to speak. So so
But we do have a lot of projects on the open window 4% side in Westchester and more. So
Yeah.
Tax
That's
credit
it.
side
Tax-
Well,
of
the
things.
4% open window path tends to work better down here again because it's higher rents. It can service more debt. Developers tend to be more familiar with that funding path, and so
And it's open window, right? So you can
Yeah.
apply when you're ready. So you're
Yeah.
not tied to
and as
that-
long as you're
that
meeting the
December
housing
deadline.
goals, and it's likely to get funded. It's a matter of where we slot it into our bond cap authority.
But yes, certainly the project should drive the decision to
Sure.
go one way or the other. Not
the other way around. So regarding to RFP or RFQ, whatever which way we decide to go, I guess, is this thing that sort of Con Ed kind of throughout this year. What happens to anything? What have you guys seen? This is more like a general open question to anybody that would like to answer. With all these projects coming along, we put in properties, not just the village, but any new project that goes along in pretty much in anything right now that's going on. What happens and what have you seen? Is any stop? Are they stopping? Are they pausing? Be like, all right, we're gonna wait, see what happens, or they just pretty much keep having me moving forward?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
Just pretty much
The natural gas moratorium.
Natural gas
The
moratorium. Correct.
Well, according to the memo, you can't do development while and there's a moratorium from Con Ed. So I guess Manny's sort of sitting there, so what are we doing?
I don't have an update or new information, but I do know that the state has been working very closely with Con Ed. We've provided them with a list of impacted developments that we're going to need assistance from them with, and they're in active discussion with them. So I know the state is actively engaged with Con Ed on this issue because it is an issue. They could, of
many
course, go
many
with
of the
that.
developers are looking at alternative energy sources
Yes.
now, and I was with a group of developers from New Rochelle who feel very impacted by that decision because of all the development going on in the community. And most of them were talking about community solar and all
Oh,
with
better.
electricity.
Yeah,
So-
it's more money up front, but
Yes.
long term.
Yes, it does affect it does affect the funding.
Yeah, so because of this, of what Con Ed has done, that's not for sakes we should stop, or anybody should stop
No.
looking into development
Right.
and stuff. So,
Because developers aren't going to stop working.
Correct.
They'll figure it
of
out.
course, yeah, there's always a way around it.
If I could just go back to your previous point, I think it was maybe 2015 or 2016 award. Right up the road in Peekskill is we have Sean Carney in the audience here. Carney Development is a frequent partner in affordable housing development with the state. And not to show any kind of preference, but if you want to go see a high quality project in Peekskill, go up to Main Street, and there's a 80 unit loft development on Main Street that you would not be able to pick out from any other building. It's a fabulous design and provides affordable housing in part for artists right there in the downtown of Peekskill.
Got the new development down there. Sure.
New development, and that's actually a brownfield site. Nice project, and mixed use. There's storefronts. In fact, they were able to get a small grocer to move into one of their storefronts.
Great.
I know we still have more questions, but I did want to invite. We do have representatives from the county. County Legislator Borgia, would you like to? We can pull a chair up to the table if you'd like to join us.
In the layer, if there's 6 layers, we're like layer 5.
No, you know what?
Catherine, we need you on a mic for the people at home.
Oh, no, okay.
We can give you the microphone.
Jamie, can you pull a chair up for Catherine to join us? Thank you.
For that. So,
Oh, microphone. Somebody.
so to Trustee Levin's question, when you put together the funding for a project like this, the county is, at the end of the project with respect to our funding. However, I do speak for my board, and I believe for the administration too, that we are very supportive of housing at all of these levels in Westchester County, and certainly would be very willing to partner. I actually had just a little pet project question for you, which is that I've been trying to find for a couple of years now a site to do intergenerational housing for grandparents raising their grandchildren, although it could be any family member raising a younger child, generational skip. Is that something that would be included in the supportive housing model? Because I know the NYCHA project that I saw, New York City has sort of different opportunities in the Bronx. Really brilliant, because they had so many things right in the building, and the success rate of those families was just remarkable. It was sad when the youngest child got to be 21 and the families had to move out because it was such a strong community, and we have such a big need in Westchester County. We have a lot of grandparents raising grandchildren in Westchester County, more than you probably would suspect for a community with the level of income that we have. So
20% of the village board.
I also had a little, sort of snide comment to make about something Trustee Herrera said, which is, I hate to be one of those people who said, back when I was a village trustee, but back when I was a village trustee, we did look at the DPW parcel twice. And it might be useful to look at the RFQ responses that we got at that time. I think it was 2006 and 8.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Anyway.
There was a proposal in
But-
2013.
I I guess I just want to reemphasize, it's a challenging site. It seems like a great location, but because of the presentation, brownfield, there's a stream running through it. It's in a floodplain. Maybe all of these can be overcome. They have in different projects that I'm aware of. It depends on, can you muster the resources to overcome those obstacles. And I think it's important to look at that site and to look at other sites as well throughout your community, and to choose which ones you think are the best to develop and what is the best use for them when you develop them.
And back to the question you asked earlier, like what are the goals you're trying to achieve?
But in that regard, actually, an RFQ, which is not, I'm glad that we're even discussing because I had not heard about it till about 2 weeks ago. Developers looking at that site physically might have more creative solutions than us saying this is what we need. I mean, because it's going to need some creative design.
Right.
Because, I mean, I know the way you said it, I just tell people it's a cliff. I mean, it's a cliff with water in the middle, and that's like half our village. But I mean, that's I think describes it. I think when I went to look at it, that's what it is.
I mean, but there were projects created
Oh,
by
yeah.
developers who intended to make money.
Absolutely.
That overcame those things. I mean, as we know, our
Oh.
village engineer always says anything can be engineered, but the question is, should it be?
That's right. No, I mean, and I think that's why the RFQ we should seriously look at, because this may be an instance where we need to look at people who have some real creative chops rather than, bam, a template
Yeah,
from some
and-
other project they did.
I think as Rose pointed out, I think you want to write your RFQ to that so you're clear in your intent of what you want to do, but you leave enough breathing room for the developer to come in and make a proposal. They're going to bring their experience to the table, and that's what you're really looking for with an RFQ. You're not looking for price. That's more an RFP. RFQ, you're looking for experience, capacity, track record of success. And they're going to bring their ideas to the table that you may not realize are possible. So the partnership is really key, because you have that experience and that sort of worldview from developing in other communities, maybe on similar sites. But your experience, your community the best, and so never lose sight of that. And those two together, when it becomes a good working partnership with solid, everybody knows what their role is, it can be a really good experience. And I think you begin to set the standard for that experience or expectations with a well-written RFQ.
So, Rose, can you please explain what an RFP is again? Because I thought in your conversation, in your presentation, you had talked about saying, based on the conversations you see, we've kind of identified a need. And then I believe in your comments you said that the RFQ would kind of be there, like that kind of conceptual, that experience would be there. So did I understand you wrong, or?
Yeah, I think it was something that Darren just said really crystallizes it. Is that when you talk about a request for proposal, you're really seeing a very concrete project come in at a certain price, trying to reach whatever goals that you've set out. And a difference could be through the request for qualifications, the RFQ, where you're seeing the experience and what that developer thinks might be possible for the site. And not, in my experience, not as in-depth as you would have with that single project, where they're really going to devote a tremendous amount of time and energy to responding to something where somebody's looking for what it could cost to develop a particular
Leave the
proposal.
cost to us, because we're going to be paying for it. So we're going to be very interested in getting the highest quality product for the least amount of money. And there's a balance there. We have design standards, so it's never going to be low quality, but so it's going to be high quality. And then what can you, and the competition drives, this and other factors. How can you get the most out of that for the money that you're paying?
And you're getting on the table with a request for qualification different ideas that you may not have thought about for a particular site.
Now, with the RFQs, are they setting the goals, or do we still have to set the goals that we want out of the site?
I think you will. I would
Okay.
say you always set the
That's
goals.
what you do, yeah. And they can be your community goals, and you can also, feel free to review the state's priorities, because they, you can take language from our RFPs and make a blend of that so that it's a combination of your values and the values that you see are consistent with yours, but they're the state's values that we're most likely to fund projects around.
To that point and to what the community needs are, we have done a lot of assessments. A lot of times when we're seeking input, we know we're not reaching everybody. That's a really challenging thing to do. But we do have a lot of data that can be mined that will give us an even richer layer. Like, for example, we have a waiting list of probably 200 applications any given day. Those applications can be reviewed so we have a better sense of what income levels people are at. Who are we not able to help at IFCA because we don't have enough deeply subsidized housing? So we have that information that wouldn't take a tremendous amount of effort. It would take a little bit of effort, but we can go through that and really quantify and start to chart that and put some really a little finer point on what they need on, because we could tell you of the applications we have, what's the average income level, what's the average family size, what's the average age, so that in and of itself provides us with a layer of data that we never even really considered looking at in that way before.
That'll be a good information in shaping your RFQ, and telling the developer, what population you want to serve. It's going to be confirmed with a market study, a third-party market study. HCR has a list of pre-qualified market analysts that we make the developers use in order to prove that out, that the market and the demand is there for these units for that particular population.
One last question, I promise. The AMI. So it seems like each year the area median income of Westchester is changing. It is getting more expensive each year. Westchester County is becoming more affluent. Do we have, when we're talking about these 60% area median income levels, do we have to go with the current area median income?
It's locked to the funding round.
Okay.
So, Andrew, you didn't get a chance to speak, but if anybody else from the county wants to speak, we're not wrapping up yet. I still have a couple of questions, but we have more microphones and chairs for anybody else, and we've got a couple of staff here. Thank you very much to our planner, Tracy Corbett, for being here, our village engineer, Paul Fraley, for being here. I don't know if we'll have any questions before this conversation is over, but I did want to touch on a couple of topics that have been raised and are still sort of hanging out there a little bit. I wanted to let folks know that we had spoken with the school district, because working in partnership with the school district is extremely important with any sort of development in our community. They are pleased to be informed about what's going on right now, and we are looking for ways that we might be able to partner with them more directly than we ever have before. Trustee Levin was sort of referencing that interest in potentially working with them directly or very closely, and I love the idea of the potential for a youth center being a good use of the Community Investment Fund. That's all great ideas that could be explored as part of the innovative ideas that might come out of an RF. Are we up to Q? And I'm not entirely sure. We're sticking with Q now? Okay. Because we were Q, then we were P, and now we're back to Q. So whichever is going to get us success, I'm fine with either letter. One other thing that we had discussed when we were putting this meeting together that I learned about was that there's we have to be mindful of, do we want this affordability to be in perpetuity? Or are we okay with it expiring? And that'll make a big difference, I assume, to the developers. I think that's something that the board should probably weigh in on very early. My inclination is that I would want it to be in perpetuity. And what does that mean? And people can disagree with me or say that they also believe that's a good idea. But that's something we probably need to identify in advance. And are there different pathways to doing that? Because right now we own the land. We don't need to own the land. We just want to make sure that it continues to be what we want it to be.
If I can just comment on that. So depending on your funding, the funding that's in the project, you know, the affordability period is like 50 years. Okay.
There's a regulatory agreement.
Yeah, there's a regulatory agreement that locks in the affordability for 50 years. And then I don't know that we've seen a project come out of that 50 years yet, you know, but the project will be refinanced, and when it's refinanced, it'll, you know, the developer, the owner will probably be coming to the state to refinance it, which means that, you know, what we do is we buy affordability. So we will invest in that project again to bring up the systems and do all the, you know, the rehab that's necessary that's going to carry it through the next 50 years. In exchange, we're going to want it to be affordable for that duration as well.
Well, we did see that happen with Snowden House and with Maple House
It
recently.
can get bought out. Yes.
Okay, so those are bought by private affordable housing developers, but it is now continuing as the affordable buildings that they have been for many years. But we saw different things happen with like Claremont Gardens, for example. So are there other mechanisms that we can put in place to be to have stronger protections to ensure that it will continue? Because 50 years from now, Darren, you might not still be there, so we might have a different government in place, but we'll still have a community that we want to be able to preserve some diversity.
I would say, you know, consult with your corporation counsel, but you could probably put a deed restriction on the property, or you could you don't necessarily have to sell the property. You could enter into a long-term land lease, you know, 99-year land lease. I think there are mechanisms of doing that. The more restrictions you put on a property, you know, it probably makes, you know, attracting, a field of developers a little bit more difficult. But these are not unheard of. These are tools that are used all the time.
And I do think that the brownfield in this location is a little bit different. So that's something that we don't necessarily need to delve into detail right now. But as it's put out in the RFP, because it's not just and you may be able, you explained a little bit about brownfields. There's actually credits that come along with it, and so sometimes it's actually a desirable thing for developers.
Remediation credits and development credits.
Yeah. In this case, we're not sure exactly how that'll work out since Con Ed is supposed to be required to do it, so it might be a little bit of a different path than is typical for developers, and that's another component of what this RFP would be. And as always, it's a nice learning experience for us in this position. Okay, so yeah,
just
please.
oh, go ahead.
Is there any points for like passive houses or like
All of our, we require
Passive houses.
we require a certain degree of energy efficiency in any project that we finance. So there's a baseline, there's enterprise, there's LEED, there's, I'm sorry?
State has their own design guidelines too, right?
Yeah. So you can choose what degree you want to, what level of energy efficiency and what program you want to use, and you do get points. The flip side to that is that these tend to be more expensive to develop, right? They're more expensive up front to build the building that meets those criteria, but then you save on the back end by lower energy costs. So when we're looking at a project, we want to have the highest degree of energy efficiency, but again, at the end of the day, you have to build it, and we want affordable housing to be a reasonable cost to develop. And so if it's more than, we look at the rest of the field in that same funding round, and if it's above the median in cost per unit, then you could lose those points that you've gotten for the energy efficiency. So it's a balancing act.
So where do we go from here? Oh, you have more
Yes.
questions on this, please?
Yeah. No, so I just wanted to, this being our first conversation at all as a board, and for the public, I kind of wanted to tie back the importance of making sure that we are implementing past studies, right? So, for example, the most recent one was the DWRC, which recommends us to, one of the first recommendations is to make a continued effort to connect our downtown to our waterfront district, which was addressed today. But then back to this, but number two was develop lots at intersection of Spring and Main. Consider infill buildings on the existing Market Square and parking lot intersection of Spring and Main, and then it goes into more detail, expand parking. I just wanted to make sure, intention-wise, because I know that the county wrote a letter specifically for the Water Street area. And I don't know if Rose, if you're only here for that particular project, or IFCA, just for I could know, or we could know. I mean, I would love to see how we could work together to prioritize which lots are ready to be built, and also which ones are more in hand with recent studies before adding another one that hasn't really been studied, and how that's going to affect us going forward from tonight.
From IFCA's perspective, and I would believe, well, I'll have Catherine speak for the county, but the idea of this is to really, the big message here is we have opportunity to take advantage of some really great programs. We have great supporters at the state level. We have developers who are interested. So I think that we'll develop at the place that's going to offer the best meeting of all those opportunities. That will come together, and it will be somewhat obvious to us all what makes the best next step as we look at this. So no one, I think, is really locked into any one certain lot or site. It's just really, where can we get the biggest impact? Where can we have the greatest success? Where can we, again, put action to the planning that we've already done, move forward, get some momentum, and then spark and catalyze growth in other areas too.
And sort of ditto for the county. We stand to support and help with the administration and coordination of anything that the municipality desires. It seems like it would meet the goals of the municipality as well as the state's goals. And we act as an advisory and partnering capacity for the decisions, the development decisions that municipalities make. I will say though that you probably want to, again, back when I was a village trustee, you probably do want to think about if you are going to go for that first win in order to create a winning pattern, you probably want to hit as many of those goals, your goals, state goals, regional goals, as you can. And I think the county will provide resources for whatever the municipality decides, but would probably advise you of the same, like that, try to make it as enriched and likely to get to the finish line as it could possibly be.
Just one more point that I'd like to add, because we've seen this even with the type of scatter site rehab that we do. Everything's pretty interconnected here, and one thing will catalyze another. So I don't think there's necessarily, of the lots that we're looking at, I don't know that there's necessarily one definitive first step and one definitive next step. I think that part of it's opportunity, part of it's what you can do now, what's going to take longer planning, if you have to address issues of park, whatever it is. But you have a corridor, essentially, that needs to be, that needs to be connected, that needs to be catalyzed. So whether you start on Main Street or whether you start down by the riverfront, once you do one thing, it's going to make it so much easier to do the other. Even if that becomes something that's a different type of project, but it's all going to catalyze each other, I think. I think that's the thing to keep in mind too.
So if I could, I'd like to tell you why I support this discussion. I like the idea of maybe at the next work session or a future one that we sit down and talk about all of the all the different properties. So Tracy has another map that she's put together that actually talks about some of the issues, and it was actually too big to put in this presentation. And I would love to sit down and talk to the board about their priorities for the parcels. But the reason that I really like this one is because it has the least impact on the people, provides the most opportunity to start to stimulate economic growth in the waterfront. And when we think about Sing Sing Prison coming in, what is it, 2025?
Project.
The museum project, we want to be ready for that. So we want to have something that's done and built so that we can start that economic boom in that waterfront area and still make that connection to Main Street. I love the idea of doing Main Street, but we're going to impact so many people that I think that it won't be that first win that we're talking about.
You mean negatively impact?
Negatively impact, correct. And that's why I support this one.
Some of them look too small.
Oh, they're really little.
I mean, some are like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're just too small, I think.
But most of them have
there are
parking
some
on
that
them.
are a more reasonable size.
You could do a scattered site project. We see that. They can be a little bit more challenging. More properties, more neighbors. You know, but that can be what fits. What I'm sorry.
Maybe not the first project.
Or you know, or
Bringing us down to earth. Thank you, Maria.
Maria's like,
It's following your advice.
Let's
Keep it
get to
simple.
the toughest thing
Keep it
first.
simple.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but I think the big picture is eyes are on the first one, and if you don't
Yeah.
get that right, the odds of being able to do any more are very low, regardless of who's on the board, because it will forever be remembered. A good success that's a decent size, it's not so small that nobody's paying attention, but a decent size allows even future boards to sort of sit there and say, "This worked.
Yeah.
We can all
You
get
may
behind the
want
next one."
to build muscle, you know, with that first project, and then take on the next one. And but the purpose of my comment really was that different types of projects in different shapes and whatever are being done all around the state, and they are, you know, the state's financing all of these, and they take different shapes because they're in different communities that have different sites and different needs. So again, it goes back to what are your priorities as a community, and if you develop a strong set of priorities that are aligned with, you know, our funding priorities, you know, I'm sure we can partner.
So there was a question of next steps.
Yeah.
So I think
Montel's favorite thing.
what's important is I think Candidator raised some very great points about compiling some data to see what's needed, and I think we need to also bring in Marilyn from Section 8 into this conversation, because she has a series of data of that, you know, the housing that's hard to find here in the community. She knows, I mean, there's a series of issues that between the data that she has, between those who have been denied, those who are on the waiting list, and the people who are unable to find certain kind of apartments. I think that could really start to help us shape the conversation. So I think we just need to look at some data points for hopefully the next work session.
Great. So the data points would be pulled together to support us on the RFQ process as well, because we would want to provide that in there.
Just that. Sorry. Because this goes to the board. We have a policy, sure, 10% set aside, 80% IMI. Does not apply for this particular project, sure, because we are going to be partnering up with the state, and we're looking to improve our housing.
It's public property, so we can structure whatever we
Yeah.
want. That's why we have so much leverage now. And you know, when something gets built on the waterfront again, it'll be 90% luxury, and that'll be wonderful in many ways. But the way to balance it is for us to really use our leverage when we own the property.
Debbie, so you say we wanted the next steps, as it was brought up. Can you find all the RFPs and all the information that we have on this particular project, and be distributed, I guess, to the board, or at least to me? I would love to see all that stuff. I think I used to have all that information before, but I don't have that anymore. So,
I'll find it,
Yeah.
because I haven't seen it myself. So, you know, make sure you get it.
thanks.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, you know, I go to lots of meetings all day long, and my rule is more than 5 people. It's exponentially more difficult to get things done. And yet, this is a public forum, so we need as many voices as possible. Somewhere in the middle, there's got to be. I mean, the work sessions have such long agendas, and people have an expectation that other things get done. I'm just wondering how we can either do like a special session, a type of like totally just this particular topic and nothing else. Doesn't have to be, I mean, everybody, maybe it does, but I think just figuring out how to winnow this down to people who can move something forward would be the way to go, because there are just like a lot of people that could be in a meeting like this, or very few as a task force. So do you have a thought on that, or do you have a thought of it? Because I think let's get going with something.
Well,
You know.
it seems like we're talking about getting some background, getting some data, doing some research, doing some prep. So there's work to be done before we bring it all.
Yeah, I think my feedback is actually pretty relevant to that. So I was going to say, adding to Trustee Bazemore's comments, that because this is the first time we're actually, as a board discussing the properties, not just this property, but because we had a lot of conversation last year about just getting ready for the potential discussion of our village-owned properties. That's why we even said no to particular proposals on particular properties. We didn't really entertain other proposals from people who were interested in certain properties. This is really the first time that the public and/or the board is really, opening up the conversation as to any next steps. So I think that between data, between the analysis of taxpayer-funded studies and where those come in with those priorities, where that fits in. Back to Trustee Levin's point, I agree, we do need the time to go into more detail. After an hour and a half, I'm not ready to kind of go into, I'm ready to learn about the RFQ and RFP process, but I'm not ready to actually do it, just because we still have this huge process to do. Even if the DPW site is still the first one that we do. But that process still has to, because we have to connect all the studies that we have said that we're going to connect and actually start implementing.
Yeah, we said the same thing. Mine was, how do we move it faster? Yours is, how do we move it slower? Because you need more time. So I just want to clarify that I'm actually concerned about taking a lot of time. A lot of people, this is the first group public meeting, but there are people around this table that I've talked to, lots of different people about lots of property. There was a committee, I wasn't on that committee, I think were the two of you?
DRWC?
Yeah,
That was me.
Yeah.
lots of conversation there. Lots and lots and lots with lots of people, actually. So NIFCA's been doing stuff, and there are experts in this room. So there have been lots of conversations. This is the first, get your arms around it and actually go, I'm trying to figure out the shortest distance between 2 points, how to get there, and that's what I'm looking for. Maybe you've done this, but that's what I'm going for. What is
And there's going to be an opportunity to check in on the progress of this proposal, whatever the project comes out of this. There's a public approvals process, right? There are site plans, so there's a time for city officials to weigh in, also the public, comment periods and so forth, to see the plans and to comment on it if they like.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that. I think that the amount of information that I know I'm aware of that's been done on the sites, on what our needs are, the amount of time it would take us to look through some of the data at Section 8 and the other places that can provide us with the need assessment, we got a pretty good handle on that. So I think tying that together, the best way to really, part of the issue is when it's always in the abstract, it's hard to get people's attention because it's always in the abstract. So one of the best ways to get something really moving and really generate input is to have something tangible. So if you decide, to move forward, the RFQ or RFP process is actually the opportunity to get the input. So you can kill two birds with one stone, and it actually makes it more rewarding for the people involved. So, and that can help shape what site you do too, so but actually doing it is probably the best way you're going to be able to get to having it done with real buy-in from the community. So I'm a big one for buy-in. There was a lot of buy-in that went in before we even got to this table. So there's opportunity to do both. And I think if you do that, you get to where you need to be, and you have a lot of people who are really happy about it in the process.
So what I was hearing from you, Trustee Levin, is can we schedule some Thursdays once we get the data?
Oh,
And then-
Thursdays.
Yeah.
I only pay to see my husband. Fabulous. So I can be
That's
divorced
probably-
this time next year. Excellent idea. No,
That-
I
you
do
know,
think
you-
I just
yeah.
think that the
You know.
public has an expectation of what these sessions
Mhm.
are. If we all come in just with this
Mhm.
purpose, prepare our homework assignments. If you didn't read this study, read it by next Thursday. If with milestones, including the public. I mean, look, this is a situation where if you decide there are 3 viable properties, because the others might be too small, they're on 3 sides of a cliff, not just one, all of that. So let's say you come up with 3 out of this. There are milestones. When is the public hearing? Boom. You put that in there, right? That's going to be. For me, as soon as the weather gets nice, the public hearing should be on that site under a tent so people can actually look around and say, oh, I get it. This is where it's going to be. And the people who live there, not people who are about to be moved from Brooklyn into this thing, but the people who live in this community, walk over, look at it, we have a conversation with some you could put all that into milestone. What is this? What happened? What just happened here?
Well, I'm
Oh,
just
him.
thinking of
No,
how the
him.
site is being
He's
used
like, I
currently.
don't
I'm
know
not
what he
sure
got.
it's really a picnic area right now.
No, but-
waste transfer station.
Yeah, and you know what? When you go to a transfer station and imagine housing and imagine an intergenerational, which Catherine brought up, I actually think you would be much more apt to be very supportive of that than sitting in this room with these lights talking about it for hours. You sit there and go, wow, instead of this, I get that, I'm in. And you have questions. So but you could put that in like the milestones. And if we miss that milestone, then we move it another 2 weeks. But I think you can do that.
It's
and
going to
that's
be-
why I want to focus on it.
I think it's going to be good practice for the actual development process because the developers not only rely on certainty of funding, it's certainly a certainty of timely implementation. There are going to be expectations to be made, to be set. The goals have to be met. There's a lot of money on the table. Things have to happen. Deadlines have to be met, or there are consequences. And so it's good that you're projecting confidence as a body that you're able to make decisions, and developers are going to see that, and they're going to want to partner with you or they're not, based upon that.
So I'm hearing a consensus of some sort.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay.
So right now we the 27th. What, Rika? So don't go anywhere yet. So
Oh.
what are you thinking?
I got to start tomorrow. I'm sorry.
So
I'm
we're
freezing.
talking about March.
Stand up, Des.
We're talking about March, because the next work session is going to be the 13th.
So do we want to meet before then? Is that what we're saying?
Look, I got nothing else going on, so I'm fine with any day that you guys choose. No, this is important.
No, but
this
at the same time, it's
affordable
not just
housing, dependent-
we need to do our homework. So we need to
So let's pick
we
a
need to
date.
get the documents, and we all need to do the homework
So
and to be prepared for the next.
why
time
don't we
meet.
ask the manager to follow up with our partners who are helping us through this process, as well as some of the other staff that are here tonight, and we talked about Marilyn and helping us gather the terms and the information we need for an RFQ, and then bring it back for us to see where we are at that point. And if that can happen in 2 weeks, that'd be great.
Would that be in addition to the meeting with Tracy about us learning about the properties and what you
Yeah,
said earlier?
I think that we could talk about that at the same time because
Okay.
I think that when you start to see how small those properties are
Yeah.
relative to this one,
Yeah.
and the encumbrances and the impact that'll have on the community as decisions are made to do that, I think it'll be an easy choice for you. I'd be happy to pull that together at the
Great.
same time.
Lay it out.
Right,
We'll do the milestones, and people will say, and then we'll make sure we've got the right people.
right.
All right. Well, I'm sure that somebody's going to say there's one other thing, but I do want to say thank you very much. This has been a tremendous learning experience for us. Thank you for bringing the project to our attention and helping us understand how it could be feasible. We've got a tremendous wealth of resources and expertise here, helping us potentially do something that would be an amazing, amazing initiative here in Ossining like we haven't seen in generations. Karen, did you want to say something else? You look
No,
like you're
I'm,
grabbing
no, I'm
the
good.
microphone.
This is
Okay.
great. I'm very happy. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, so Debbie, do you feel like you have a clear understanding of how you're going to help move it forward with staff and consultants and helpers in the next couple of weeks?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Then I think we probably need a 5-minute break and say thank you to our.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome to stay, but if you wanted to,
Meetings
we
are
have
really
more
exciting.
exciting
They came from
topics.
Brooklyn and Albany to get here.
Back. Thank you very much. Moving on to the Comprehensive Plan Committee discussion, and we're joined by our planner, Tracy Corbett. Debbie.
All right. So fun topic number 2. And this is moving forward on the Comprehensive Plan Committee. I want to thank Tracy for putting together our little design. Her and I talked about how we could talk about the committee and how we could help everyone understand the committee's role in this whole comprehensive plan. And so I emailed this to everybody.
Or are we going to
Did you
put it
get
on
them?
the screen
We
or
can
no?
put it on the screen. Yep.
Ready?
I have some paper copies if anyone
It's
wants.
okay, I have it on.
Let's go.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's on mine as well.
Yep. It's on, attached to the agenda, right?
Yes.
I can't figure out which are, did I do?
Okay. There you go. So, I'm hoping that this graphic gives the board and the community some understanding of the roles of, what is CPC, Central Planning? What did you-
Comprehensive Plan Committee.
Comprehensive Plan Committee. So that's where we had originally talked about like an executive committee or a 7-member, committee that would lead this whole effort. And we wanted you to understand what that meant. The second area there, and at the bottom it tells you, 5 to 7 members for the CPC. It guides the process. You're going to do a lot of reviewing, commenting, reviewing documents, and then also being involved in selecting the committees. And then the next area is the different committees. And this is really however the CPC committee wants to see it divvied up. And it's reviewing the base study information. And so there's a whole list of items there that could potentially be subsets that you could task a committee to look at natural resources or task them to look at infrastructure or sit down with a map and decide what the neighborhoods are and where those neighborhood boundaries are and who would you want leading neighborhood discussions. The next section is the community forums, where we share the base information, we do the SWOT analysis, and evaluate where there may be holes in the information as you decide what you want our community to be in the future, and the community has given its input. And then and the next part of this slide is the further studies. Down at the bottom it says community engagement, consultant services. So we had talked to you about having a consultant that would come in and do an outreach plan and how that plan would look. And that would be the consultant we would bring in to help us through all of these different forums, and especially the community forums, running that. How do we reach out to the community? How do we get people to come to the meetings? Where should they be held? Those kind of things. Can we go to the next?
Is it here?
Yeah. So then if there's a decision that there are more studies that are needed for more information, that's when the CPC would make a decision with the chairs of the committees on, and that's then the light bulb. They would then commit to getting additional studies to help that committee make decisions on things that should happen. Then we have more community forums. We share that information. We look again at that SWOT. And then it goes, again, back to the CPC with the primary committees, and they make decisions. And that's where they agree on the focus, direction, the comprehensive plan, where do you want it to go? We then begin to hire a consultant who can start drafting the new plan for us or doing the modifications for the plan. Again, we would have the community engagement consultant who would then lead us through plan development, which is the next slide. So, here's where we begin. We have community engagement led by the CPC and the committees for visioning, goals, and objectives for all of the areas that the CPC has decided is where we need to focus our attention for updating the plan. Then we have a draft plan. It comes together. It's reviewed by the committees and the CPC, and then we have public forums to share that information. And that information then is, we say, okay, did we hear you correctly? Are there things that we missed? Do we need to tweak things? And we have those discussions, again, led by the CPC and the committee, and then we get to the final plan. From the final plan, at that stage, we would send it to the land use boards, and we would get their comments, because you don't want to make a decision until you've gotten their formal feedback. After the plan is developed and everyone's comfortable, we go to the next slide, which is then the legislative process. We start the public hearings and the seeker, the GEIS, and we go through that. And you can see where the Board of Trustees then comes together to make those decisions, works with the CPC and the committees, and ultimately adopts the plan and then directs the update for the zoning. So I just wanted to kind of go through that process so that you would understand where the CPC, where that planning group that you would select, however you want to see that, how important selecting those members can be because of where they fit into this process. So if you want to go back to the first slide, I think.
Question, based on everything you presented, what's the time frame on this?
Tracy? No.
It depends when we get started. I mean, once you get the ball rolling, I would say, it's a good year to get to the draft plan.
Okay.
I think, I'm not putting words in Quantel's mouth, but I think if you're going to draw this out, regardless of when we start, just a ballpark of it should take 2 months for this piece, 3 months for that. Clearly, even if you want to engage a community, it could take a couple of weeks to get people into I'm going to call a town hall meeting because I don't know what else to call it, or it could take 3 months. You don't really know, but a little bit of a skeletal, like this typically takes 2 to 3 months. There might be a 6-month lag, like we might hit like a snag of some sort. I don't know what the snag is. Something happens. Everybody understands that. So it's not like I would ask for September to October, but this box is 2 to 4 months typically. This box might take 3 days to 5 days. Like this is great, very helpful. I think though, like a time frame of approximate times in man hours or days or months or something would just give a little bit, and you start with, it'll take 2 years and let's now chop it up.
Right.
I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if it's promising too much.
Some things that are the unknowns is the further study. I mean, once we'll have a better idea of the length and time once we get through the base information, because it depends on that. That's the unknown here, is how much further study. After we review things, people might say, we need a traffic study. We need to understand demographics and population projections. So until we know what that is, there are some unknowns. So it's really hard, almost beyond this slide, because that further study, we don't know yet.
So just, there's a language thing that I'd like to, calling the 5 to 7 member group, the CPC, the Comprehensive Planning Committee, and then the other subcommittees, just subcommittees. Just from a language perspective, I'm thinking about the DRWC, and when we were on that, it was similar in concept in that we had 5 of us from village government. It was the mayor and trustee, it was me and Quantel, and it was Stuart, and it was our planner, and it was a longtime member of the planning board. And we were just part of the committee, and so but really we were not directing the discussion. We were not identifying what should be the areas of focus, what should be the priorities, what should be the subcommittees. That was really generated by the members. And this could be a little bit of a different forum, but what I saw us as is a resource and steering to make sure that it stayed on track and it was making sense with how municipal government works. And obviously we have a lot of staff resources that would be helping with that as well. So to me, what we're calling the sort of center, the CPC, which is, to me, that's more of a steering committee to make sure that we're, going in the right direction and staying on track. And then the subcommittees, I mean, when we appoint people to a committee, like, it would be nice to just say, you're part of the comprehensive planning committee, and then you serve on the subcommittee that focuses on transportation. You serve on the subcommittee that focuses on environmental something. And there's a lot of ways that could be broken up because, the environmental stuff, the EAC people have already expressed interest. That's sort of a pre-appointed group of people that have an interest in land use and environmentalism that could be very instrumental in that subcommittee. So I think of it a little bit of a different way. So and it's fine if we use different words, but sometimes language matters, and that's the way I'm seeing it. I don't know if that's consistent with what you were saying here, just using different words.
Your mic.
If it's really up to the subcommittee of what this looks like, then when we talk about who's going to be on the 5 to 7 group, it's not a big a deal if the subcommittees are going to determine what the plan looks like. But if the CPC is going to literally like say, okay, this works, this doesn't work, then when it comes to who we're selecting, the onus is very important of who's in the 5 to 7. So is the subcommittee going to be the bulk of what's determining this plan, or is it going to be the CPC? Like, you understand my question?
Yeah, I think that's what we're here to discuss. When I first came to you with an idea of, I thought the committees could be and how it could format, then I've met with almost all of you, except for Rika, because of snow. And, I hear all your concerns and what you think, how this could work. So that's why we actually kept it just a group and not really identifying who those people are. This is what we want it to be, and there are many ways. There's no really necessarily right or wrong way. There are some municipalities where the comprehensive plan committee is their board of trustees or their city council. Sometimes it's just community members, or sometimes it's a mixture of the two. I think the mixture of the two, because you do want the board to be involved in the process so that they're not surprised when it lands on their desk at the end. So if the board is involved in the process, then they understand it and they can have their concerns addressed while it's being formed. So this CPC, which could just be the guiding and group that steers the committee, could be a steering committee. So I think it's really what you're comfortable with, and that's why we want to have this discussion and to really see what you would be comfortable with. I mean, the community, and the way it was, the last plan was done with subcommittees that did the work and the bulk of the work and then reported back to the main committee. So they did it that way by breaking down. There's a lot to review, and you really want, you don't want everyone on the whole committee. You don't want to have a committee of 30 because it's really hard to get work done. So you do need a smaller group to guide the process and be efficient. Like you said earlier about having too many people in a room, it's tough to get work done. But if you break down into smaller groups and tackle the projects, and these subcommittee things, they're just samples. Yeah. That's not inclusive. That is just to get you thinking about what those could be. That was just typical subcommittees.
So for me, if the CPC is more like a guiding, making sure you're on the right track, to me, we can start this process sooner rather than later. It's all about the amount of influence that the CPC is going to have. If it's up to the subcommittee to really form this group and people are very passionate about whatever point is on the subcommittee, or people say, hey, we want to focus on this, focus on that. As long as the committee, as long as the comprehensive plan is really a reflection of what we're gathering from the public versus these, but that particular group. So that's just my thought process at this.
Just to echo on that, I think that's perfectly well said. When I met with Tracy and Debbie in our one-to-one regarding our feedback for this, my main concern was, which now we'll call for now, the CPC. Is this a group that not only has the executive ability to analyze and lead and do the hard work, because that's a huge commitment to even be on that board, right? So, but are they also the ones that I did get I had concerns about them also being the ones that select the subcommittee, and then them being the standard as to what goes through, what doesn't. So I like having some sort of, I don't know how to say it, but making it clear that the buck doesn't stop with them or the board. It's more about the subcommittee, the CPC, the Board of Trustees, working together to better analyze and transcribe the public comment to get our final document to the policy adoption phase, if that makes sense. But my concern is, and has always been, the 5 to 7 people on that CPC, or whatever we call it, the exec board.
Sure. I think one thing that'll be important is that, especially these subcommittees, is having possibly a board of trustees being on each of these subcommittees. How many, I don't know that we're going to have, how many we have there, 8, but it would be good that if there was representation on that, so that you're involved in the process. We did have a model where maybe there was members of the Board of Trustees on the CPC, but that's something I think we should really discuss further on what you think would work best.
I did think that we were talking about having 2 members of the Board of Trustees, myself and a trustee, on what I still want to call the steering committee, because I think the Comprehensive Planning Committee is broader than this group of 5 to 7 people. But the other, when we're talking about the Board of Trustees, and I wouldn't call it an executive committee, because this is the executive committee, because the decisions have to be made by the Board of Trustees, the 5 of us. And I don't think we should be slide 5. But I mean, it doesn't have to be written here, but if there are 2 of us who are part of the steering committee, or any of us who are serving on subcommittees, there's going to be updates publicly, and we're not going to wait until it's practically ready for adoption to come to the Board of Trustees and be discussed at a work session. I mean, I assume that's what you were thinking as well. It's just that there's a lot of work that has to be done by this group that's not going to be done on camera on Wednesday nights. It's going to be done in small groups, either the 5 to 7 steering committee, or in these subcommittees, or perhaps as the subcommittees coming together periodically to touch base with each other and see how they're complementing each other, I would assume. Is that?
Yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing. It sounds like the 2 people that did it, that it worked well, and that's the steering committee, and everybody's on that and that people percolated to the top based on their interest. And I assume what happened was, if everybody wanted to be on one subcommittee and no one wanted, then the steering committee has to sort of sit there and say, look, we need people here, because, and it sort of percolates on its own, because people raise their hands on their own, but the steering committee steers a boat. You're steering to what needs to get done, and you hit milestones.
So like you were saying, if we could decide on what the 5 to 7 members would be, they could get started fairly quickly, and it would probably be helpful if there was a sense, and I'm sure experience of the DRWC, which included an analysis of our comp plan, we could get an idea of how many subcommittees we want. You don't want subcommittees to have more than 7 or 8 people on it, but you need to have at least 3 or 4. So that could really help us understand how many people are we looking to appoint to the Comprehensive Plan Committee. Because if we're talking broadly, all the subcommittees make up the group that does these, whatever, 5 subcommittees, 6 probably not 9, but and sometimes maybe it could be the Environmental Advisory Council is like a pre-selected group, and like okay, if you guys are up for it, we'll task you with the green building guidelines work, and maybe there'll be 1 or 2 other people that join you. There's different ways that we can, maybe we don't have to. like if we have people who are already on committees, the HPC might want to be a subcommittee of the Comprehensive Planning Committee, and that because there are already people who have volunteered and been appointed to a committee that has a particular area of interest, just as an example.
So my question is, just looking at the subcommittees, who ties it all together? Because what may be good for housing is not good for traffic, or what may be good for commercial may not be good for historic. That's my question. Who's the person who's tying them together? Because we could have, historic. They may say, oh well, if it was built before 1952, we're going to designate it, right? And I'm just really using a small example. I'm not serious, but like who ties it all together?
Well, I think mathematically, the more subcommittees you have, the more complicated it is to meet in a room, and each group presents typically, its version, and that's when you start going, oh, you said traffic with cars, but I'm working on traffic of people. We just like our bumper cars now, like totally opposite. So you are going to have milestones where everybody, all the subcommittees, I think, come together. Maybe they go to the steering. I just mathematically, the more subcommittees you have, the more time and the more
Difficult to
that group
reconcile.
that comes together becomes more unwieldy. If you have too few, you're going to end up with a project that says, what, you had 3 subcommittees, you didn't do anything after 2 years. I mean, this is another one of those, and I don't think there's a concrete answer. I think that's why we're having this conversation. There has to be sort of like, if you have an average of 5 people, one's going to get sick and one's going to move, right? So you can't do like too few. So you need an average of whatever, 5 to 7, and maybe a couple people can be on 2, but no more than 2, because then, and you start doing the math. You say, gee, I think we're coming up with 8 subcommittees, and maybe a couple of subcommittees like the EAC that could be its own on this, all right. And now you're doing the math and going, yeah, this is doable. To sit in a room like this, or a different room, present each other, talk to each other, stay on top of things. I think that's, and you guys did this last year with that other, so I mean, you must have some experience of some learnings from that. I mean, I have learnings professionally that tells me like too many is just unwielding, but I don't know, 5 people.
So tell us, when you say the 5 to 7 member group, and I'm envisioning it with myself and Quantel on the steering committee, then what are the other members? Are they village staff? Are they community members with particular expertise?
I mean, there was some discussion, and when the conversations that we had with the one-on-ones, how it evolved since the first time is that I did think that there should be someone who has an experience from a land use board should be one of them. Planning board, they deal with a lot of these issues. If, current or past member, someone who understands the land use review process, because so much of this ends up being a zoning, the foundation for zoning. The other would be maybe people that are just community leaders. I would think maybe a balance of having, of the electeds and people who know the process on the inside, and then some people who just know the community. And I think those are ones that we can think about of who those might be, whether it's a community leader, or what you think is a priority. Maybe if it's a housing community leader, or since that's been such a big issue here over the last 5 years with all the studies that you've done. Maybe it's someone who's a downtown development leader. I think maybe that's something to discuss. There was a discussion that one of my one-on-ones that maybe some staff should be on that steering committee. There are some communities that have done that. I know of one in Westchester County. But really, staff, I'll be involved with the whole thing along the way, and we'll be kind of steering the steering committee, and so will Debbie. So we're kind of like the ex officio people, and Paul will be there and to provide guidance, and we will be help steering the boat as you proceed. So I don't necessarily think that's necessary, since I'll be working with the consultants and you'll have this team that are guiding you. So It could just be a 5-member committee and a much smaller one. I think calling it a steering committee is a better way than calling it executive committee. It just sounds better because that's really what you are doing. You'd be steering the process as we proceed. So this is, oh, go ahead.
When we talk about skills that will be brought to the steering committee, I would like to see one member at least be bilingual in English and Spanish. I think that would be really valuable for how we communicate more broadly, and I don't think that's unattainable. We have more than half of our population
Sure.
is native speaker. Whether they're completely fluent in either language is not always the case, but
You know, what
Both
came
languages,
up
rather.
through the process of some of these subcommittees was the discussion of having neighborhood subcommittees once they are identified and have there be some workshops centered around neighborhoods and neighborhood issues. And those should be, I think, really reflective of the population that live there, and we should try and achieve some balance of that our boards and things are reflective of our community, if possible.
sure.
So this has been an evolution as to, and I'm happy it has, about just how we want to define what I think we should now call the steering committee. I think just
Makes sense, right?
But it sounds like it's very village heavy. So like the village, by village heavy I mean it's already people of influence or appointed or elected roles at the village. Not to say that it shouldn't, but if it's going to be people led, do you want a different type of level or below, or do you just want the public to be involved solely in the steering committee, to be led by professionals and experts at the steering committee? Or because it just makes it very hard for me to then trust and or work to appoint 3 community leaders, and then what determines that, and if that makes sense.
I think if you're just talking about staff being supportive presence, and 2 elected officials, and I mean, planning board members are community members that are volunteers. I mean, we're almost that, but then maybe you would suggest we go more to 7 rather than 5. So there's that much greater opportunity for representatives, and by community leaders, it could just be somebody who knows a lot of people in their circle of connections. Doesn't have to be somebody who's an executive director of a local program, right?
Right, a lot of these, this steering committee will be helping us develop the outreach plan, so people that, know people, or know the community well, should be important. Helping us define the neighborhoods. I mean, you as electeds know that well, and these different areas of neighborhoods. I'm fairly new here, so I can't actually put on a map where are the geographic boundaries of these neighborhoods. And so I think that'll be an important component of this. And, whether it's 5 or 7 people on this steering committee, or if you think it should be more, maybe, this is something that we can work on, something that you'd be comfortable with, because there's all different formats with it for how this can be done, and in Westchester County even.
Just my last point onto that is one thing that I've encountered in either master plans or strategic plans, especially in government, is, and I asked you this, what is our mechanism to rule out any conflict of interest for people that we appoint to either steering committees or exec or whatever we call it? Do you appoint Omar, who has an interest or is working on a blank in the village with the county, or with, what is that procedure? Is that done in our interview process by the board? Is there a mechanism to kind of, everyone's gonna have a bias, right? That's everyone has a bias, but how do we make sure that we're not setting ourselves or others up for a conflicting situation, especially with something like this, as we discuss in our meeting?
Stuart, you're leaning forward. Do you want to comment on conflict of interest questions?
Only to the extent that if it's covered by the code of ethics, it's dealt with there. If there's a particular issue that
If reported, right? I mean, if it gets to like a report, right? Or inquiry.
Well, you can always ask you can ask individuals questions based upon what is prohibited conduct under our code of ethics, and if something falls under there, you can do it. If there's a question, you can always ask the Board of Ethics for an advisory opinion as to whether that person can appropriately sit, on the particular committee.
So, for me, and we haven't, I believe in representative government. I don't believe that everybody has to be involved in every conversation. For me, if Victoria and Quantel are on this committee, and I saw you guys function the other one, I am okay with the two of you making the recommendations, and other people may not be okay, but I am, that says these are the people. So if one of you has a problem with a person, you nix that person. I don't think there needs to be a whole lot of explanation, frankly. If there is a group of people and you don't want one of them because I don't know why, and you don't want one of them because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to move forward. And I mean, every member of this board has lived here a long time and knows lots and lots of people. None of us know everybody, but every one of us knows a lot of people. And every one of us can say, this is an interesting person, I mean, with a phone call, do you have an issue with it? So it's almost like the right of refusal, right? It's like, yeah, I'm not okay with this person, and for me, it's not even important why, between the two of you, and if so I'm okay to hand that over. Otherwise, it's like, to me, too many people involved at every single part of it. And I think between the two of you, which is why you're both on this, and you were both on something last year, I'm not sure I even need a whole lot of reason. I'm okay that if both of you have 100% confidence in you're two of the 5 to 7, right? So it's choosing another 5 people as a steering, and then there is, so for me, I'm a big believer in representative government, so I'm, go ahead and go at it, because knowing the two of you, for both of you to agree 100% on a person, I think covers a lot of bases between all the circles of the people that you're involved in. And your stated intent and desires and having done this and all of that sort of stuff. So, sort of said, I'm still going to meet with you, not to worry. I'm sorry we got snowed out more than once, I think, but because I also feel that things are more evergreen, that it's very difficult to sit now and predict that some of these things have to start. And one subcommittee is going to sit there and go, I'm working on this, and so are they. This should have actually been one subcommittee. You guys thought it should be 2, but it really should. And I think what's going to happen organically is you'll join those. And some committee people just won't show up because the people we chose never attend.
Yeah.
We might have to, Stuart, think about that 75% attendance thing and use some of the things that we put into place. So again, somebody might be on business trips unexpectedly and now not showing up, and now the committee doesn't have enough people. So there are going to be some of those. That's just the organic nature of committees. And that's why there's a steering committee, not to push people in a certain direction, not to say, I really want you to do this, not what you really want to do. And by the way, knowing the people in this community and Ossining, I don't think you're going to be able to push the people around on the committees anyway, so but I mean, that's a steering, right? It's like, hey guys, nobody's showing up to this committee, what's going on? I mean, that's really, I think, a big part of it. So I am handing over my power of whatever power I have, because I think between the two of you could do, but enjoy. That's my opinion about representative governments and committees.
Thank you, Rika, and I agree with you. I want to keep moving forward the process. This is a great 3 pages presentation. Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate that. I guess I have several questions, but I just want to, what is the next steps after this meeting? What are we doing? And you have one of the key elements in the first slide, so to speak, where it says Community Engagement Consultant Services. What are we doing with this? You sent me a copy of what Los Angeles County Department of Regional Planning was doing, sort of briefly of a glossary of translations of different sentences and what that means. You sent me that a couple weeks back. I thought it was great, sort of like a definitions of things. Not sure if it was meant to be for this particular case, but I think some key words need to be part of this as a translation. And again, if we said, if the whole board agrees, let's do it tomorrow. What are we doing with the consultants? Where we are with that? Have you interviewed people? Do we have a list? what is the coordination between your office and the village manager's office on that status?
So I have done research looking for some planning consultants that are bilingual. There isn't a very long list of those, and I have started to engage one that I know of, and she's actually referring and finding another consultant who actually does real community engagement to team up and see if they can't create a proposal for us for something to react to. So we are looking and trying to develop ones that could do bilingual community engagement, because I think that is going to be very important through this process, and hopefully get someone on staff once we see their proposal, see if it's a fit for us or if we could modify it, so that we can move forward. So we've started that process. We have also been focusing on getting a staff person on board, and hopefully we get a staff person that is bilingual as well. I did share the thing from Los Angeles. That is just I wanted to share it with you, and I shared it also with Omar, because it is something they did in Los Angeles, because they found having just even bilingual planners wasn't enough, that there are words that just don't translate that well in the processes. So they spent a lot of time creating this dictionary of land use terms so that they communicate properly, because they found even when they were just with the bilingual planners, it wasn't enough, that things were getting lost in translation. So, hopefully, when we get someone on, hopefully I hope to get someone Spanish speaking on board that can help with our internal things, not just a consultant to do the community engagement or in some of our communications in Spanish if possible. So we are working on that process to get an community engagement consultant services. I work with Debbie on these. When we created this presentation, this was actually a very collaborative effort between us. I took her chicken scratch and turned it into this.
So how many consultants? I'm sorry.
So what is your time frame? Because to us, this is key of what, and again, I agree with Rika and Quantel on this, where's the time frame of this whole process? So to me, it's like, we need to know what is your time frame of getting a consultant, where's the proposals, where are we doing?
Right.
Because without that, I don't think we can make a decision of
Right.
how do we proceed with this.
We're trying to get the proposal. I thought I would have it this week. They thought they'd have it on
Well,
Monday.
you gave us a draft. That we do have a timeline draft that you gave us last time.
Yeah,
right?
we've had a
Yeah.
the working plan.
Draft,
but
I mean.
This is evolving until we actually get the committee started, because the committee is so important of guiding this process. So until they're a part of it, they're part of this dialogue, and they're a part of the creating the community engagement. We need the steering committee to help form that. So they're a
We
part
need
of this dialogue.
consultants to guide us
Correct.
to get to the
Yes.
next level, almost at the same time of the steering committee itself.
Right.
So that's my concern. is the
I hope
timing
to have
part.
someone on board in March. Hopefully we can get something
Yeah,
on
but
board to start
when
the
you
process.
said March, were you talking about a staff member or
No,
actually
no,
have the
looking to get
consultant?
some community engagement
Okay.
consultant, so once the committee is started, that we can hit the ground running to start developing that community outreach plan and defining the neighborhoods and to help that process. And, because the other things that they're gonna work on is, how we communicate with the public, our website, the surveys. They will start helping us produce that plan and that action plan. And even our grassroots effort of how do we set up at the farmer's market to go where the people are, where should we meet? Meeting in a place like this is known not to be the best place for these type of workshops. It should be at the library, at the schools, going to where the people are. And how do we get the people out? And that's all that they would work
So
on.
hopefully you'll be getting something of a proposal.
I
by
hope
the
to
end of
have-
the
I'd
week
hope
or
to have it on
early next
Monday.
week?
Yeah.
Okay, so by Wednesday, the latest, are we talking about just one, or are we talking about at least two or three?
I actually only found one planner in the area that was bilingual in my research, and I'm involved with the American Planning Association. If anyone knows anyone, please let me know. There just aren't a lot of them. The one that I know grew up in Ossining. She now works mainly out of the city, and she's worked on other projects here. So it's someone who worked on the Market Square project. She did a component of that. She does a lot of stuff with Main Street redevelopment, but she is bilingual and she grew up here. So I thought those were two really good.
I'm sorry. Are
Ask
you
your
done
questions.
now?
Yeah, for
Okay.
now,
No, I
yes,
didn't know.
thank
I didn't mean to interrupt before. So I'm just a little confused. It feels to me like most of the consultants I know we budgeted is about community outreach, gathering.
No,
Okay.
no.
So there are two consultants involved in this.
Actually, during the further study, you might get a traffic engineer. I don't think we
Okay,
know.
that's different though. But to get us started,
To get us started, we have
there
a
is a community engagement specialist consultant. And is there another consultant that's doing something else?
Yes, when you get into here, when we start the comp plan, when we really start, once we get past the base study information, which we're doing that work in-house, is then when we start doing the comp plan process, the visioning, then we'll hire a consultant to do the visioning, goals, policy, and recommendations.
Okay, that's not a bilingual consultant, the visioning and all of that. Is it, so
Well, we're gonna
is
have,
it,
they're gonna work with our community engagement consultant, so they can work hand in
Just
hand.
staying on board.
Yeah, they would probably stay on board.
so
I
are
just had-
you into, so have you found anybody for that consulting gig?
No, because we don't really know the scope of what that would be at this time. Until you
Okay.
get to, where you want to focus on your comprehensive plan. We're going to evaluate the whole village so that we can say we've evaluated the whole village and, where do we have to focus our efforts.
Okay,
It might determine the type of consultant that we want.
okay.
You might
I
want
just saw
someone who focuses on
consultants
Main
every
Street, yeah.
slide. I'm trying to understand. So really,
Yeah, it's the same
there's a
consultant,
first
though.
group of
Yeah.
consultants, which is really all about community engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what direction you're talking about. Input from community, output to community, it's community engagement.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one you're focused on now. At some point, you may need another consultant or consulting group to do other things. And there may even be a third, all of which is what we talked about, and you have your budget for that.
Correct.
Got it. I mean,
Yep.
I just wanted to be clear because,
And I think if you look at that slide, it's, the community engagement consultant is in phase one, and then it begins phase two when we get ready for plan development, but the hire consultant for drafting the plan. So we actually want somebody to
Yeah.
put all of our policies and put it together, yeah.
And it's split into two phases because we don't know the definitive scope of the
Right.
second phase. So the first contract that we would have would just be to get us through phase one.
okay. Got it. Thank you. I mean, that was my question.
So I just wanted to, so we've been discussing this for 2 months and we've made tremendous progress, at least to my view, we've made tremendous progress in actually understanding, mainly, I think, what the actual framework would be to start and go forward. One thing that I'm still not clear on after 2 months, and maybe it's a decision that we just made based off of behavior and actions, and that's okay, is we had a huge discussion at a work session at first about the importance of outreach before and making sure that you reach out to people you don't reach out to apply. And we even had a consensus and asked the manager to draft with the vendor bilingual, whether it's a poster, brochure, whatever you want to call it. And that was supposed to be done ASAP. I watched the meeting. I was like, was that only me? Was that, and it never happened. It never. I don't know who stopped it. I don't know why it stopped. I don't know. Are we? We never discussed it. So I got your email that you need more consensus of the board, but you got consensus to get it started. So I don't know why you need more consensus when you already got it for that particular item. So I don't really know. I'm glad that our meeting on the 28th got canceled because till this day, I don't really know what our message is because we haven't established it.
So, can I just
yeah.
piggyback? So, two questions. To piggyback on his comment, talking to a community member today, I actually saw a resident in Asane. I said, hey, did you, because I know there's been applications submitted for the comprehensive plan. I said, hey, are you going to apply? She says, I'm waiting on the meeting. So, first question.
She's waiting on
She's
what?
She's waiting on the meeting that we postponed.
Oh, okay.
All right. So
Okay.
So that, because of the, yeah.
Yeah, so that
Like
she
in the
could.
library that we.
Yeah, right. To
Right.
figure out like
Right.
what we're actually what we're actually looking for. Question for you. In the DWRC, we did a SWOT analysis. Can you explain why a SWOT analysis is number one necessary for a comprehensive plan? Is that something that the American Planning Association recommends? Can you just explain like why that's a part of the process?
Sure. I mean, you just with any plan, it is a very common thing that's done with any planning process is to analyze your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats. It's just part of looking at your, let's say you look at all your housing structure, your housing, and you know what are the strengths of that. It's just to get the dialogue going. It's just a framework to learn and engage and understand what people think is important and what we need to focus on and what we need to protect. It's just a way to help have a conversation. And if you frame it on these four things, it's been a very common practice now. There are other tools or ways they different language, and basically it's all the same thing. If you're looking at you know, an analysis and visioning, you know, it's just another way of putting it. But yes, it's very common to do it with, and it's probably one of the more common ways they frame it today.
And we can take the base information that we have, right? So that's all part of studying what we already have. And so that conversation can go a little bit faster because we can already list what has been done. And then we can say, is this still accurate? And then so it's a different conversation. It's more of an analytical and say, well, you forgot this, or, well, that's not so important anymore, or, yeah, this is a new threat that's come up since the last one. So, you know, we list out that base information, so we're not losing that knowledge.
And I think part of it's to get it away from, you know, like you say, planning jargon. So I think that is to like put it down in more common language, and I think that's basically why they.
I
do
just
this
think it frames conversations. It just changes. It's a great thing to do because if everybody does it, there's a template that you start from that everybody sort of does.
I'd like to go back to what Trustee Herrera was saying, though, about where we are with, and also what you were saying, Trustee Bazemore, about somebody's waiting for the meeting so that they can apply, and we haven't made it clear as what people are applying for, and to get, you know, well, 3 to 5 people, so 5 people from the community that would be appointing for this steering committee. That's an easier lift than going out for the broader committee. I felt like earlier in the meeting I was hearing we can pretty quickly get 5 to 7 people to do the steering committee, but I still don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong if you don't feel that way, but I still don't know then, are we waiting until we engage with a community engagement consultant to go out and get people to even know what they're applying for, or can we put together some material so that we all have a variety of circles in our community? I could just, any meeting that I go to, I can say, can I have 10 minutes on the agenda? I want to, let people know there's this opportunity, whether it's, a Neighbors Link meeting or a church meeting or, Green Ossining meeting, whatever meetings we can get ourselves invited to, or neighborhood group we can get ourselves invited to. All 5 of us can be the ambassadors for that, but we need to all be speaking the same language and giving people the same information. And right now we don't have that material in any language. So
yeah, I mean, that's what we discussed in depth at the last meeting, and we actually gave the consensus to move forward to develop that outreach tool. And I know that Jamie had potential vendors to go. So some I don't know what happened along the way that it stopped. And even though I think it is an easier lift, especially now being at this point and us discussing that, at least the steering committee may be a little easier for us to appoint to. That to my opinion, I don't know if that's going to, even if it is for those 5 people, I don't know if that's going to get us past the same circles that we're in if we didn't do the education first. So how I sold it last time was education, buy-in, apply, right? So are we saying, which is okay if we are, I guess, are we saying that we don't want to educate people on what it is for the steering committee, but only for the steering committee, but only for the subcommittees, and we only want to educate people for those. But when it comes to the higher level stuff, we don't. Because if we're changing our mind on that, that's fine. But I just want that to be discussed, and I still want to know why it got stopped.
So can we go back to the first slide? Mm-hmm. So I think that it got stopped because there was confusion over what it is we were trying to do. And I think that this defines it a lot better so that we can put together an announcement that says, we're looking for people to serve on this committee, and these are all the opportunities that you have. Because some people are going to be very passionate about one thing and not passionate about another. And so now we have an opportunity to further define that, because I know that's also something that you've been asking for, and trust me, Trustee Bazemore as well, is, that definitive, what are these people going to be doing? And so if we say that you're going to be looking at some information on where we are for the environment, and you can apply to be on the environmental committee, so that you start to sort out what people are interested in. But I think that if we get the CPC together, or the steering committee, then you can decide how you want to divvy it up, and then we can then go out and say, hey, do you want to be on this committee? Now, here's the other thing to think about, is you might not have to appoint every single person that's on this committee. Perhaps you want to consider appointing a chairperson and a vice chair, and letting them go out and get people that they want to bring in that are part of that committee as well. So it lessens the burden of the board having to appoint every single person that's on here, and it opens up those committees to further discussion based on how the chairperson or vice chair wants to run that meeting. It's just an idea.
Are you talking about the particular steering committees or just the subcommittees?
The
subcommittees.
subcommittees.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. So the steering committee decides what subcommittees you want, and then maybe we just look for people that would be willing to chair it. So as you said, people will come and go, and some will move, and but they're going to really be excited about what they're interested in.
So with respects, I think, again, understanding, what the steering committee will be responsible for, the only time that it gets like, where there's concern about who may be on it is probably when you talk about the comp plan focus. Right? Because it's decisions to agree upon the focus and direction of the comprehensive plan. So
That's done with everybody.
that's done with everybody, not just the.
Right, so that's why I'm saying maybe you want to consider, appointing a chairperson, because then that chairperson comes and not 10 or 20 people that wanted to serve on that committee,
So
to provide focus and input.
So who's providing the focus outside of the steering committee?
All of these people, all of
All
these
okay. So
committees.
all right. So
Everybody
wait.
comes together and shares their ideas, and we say, okay,
So based on this graphic, when I see CPC, I'm thinking this is the thing they're going to be doing, versus, the subcommittee or whatever the case may be.
right,
Broader
The whole broader committee.
yeah. So that's why they're in the middle, because they're
Gotcha.
hub.
Okay. All right.
the hub of the wheel.
Okay. So cool. All right.
Wheel
And
doesn't
then
move without everybody else.
so the draft plan, who's doing that? That's just going to be the steering committee.
So the draft plan would be done by the consultants
Okay.
based on the information that was given to them by everybody,
Cool.
right? Right? Am I saying that right, Tracy?
So basically, we just have to figure out who the 5 to 7 people are, and then we can start.
Yeah, we can get
Okay.
started.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. Thank you for that. So, because now I kind of understand the decision or intention. So, you don't believe we should do outreach for the steering committee, but only for the subgroup
For the
under the
subgroups.
advisement of the
If all
steering
of,
committee.
if all of you agree on who you want on your steering committee, then I think that we just have to advertise for the rest.
Yeah, but we can reach out to anybody that we think is appropriate to
Absolutely.
be in that part. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be just
Yep,
those 5 people. It could be
all of you can.
whoever. It doesn't matter.
And I mean, it's different, but yeah.
No, I understand where you're going.
Yeah.
I agree to a certain extent, but that doesn't limit us to reach out to people that may not be interested in or known about a program or something like this. So I'm okay with that. I thought we were okay with that a couple.
Well, no, I mean, we agreed to something completely different a couple weeks ago. We're just getting updated on it now. But I was trying to understand what happened, and which now we do. But that's why I just came in here with all these questions, because I don't know what happened with what we agreed on, that's all.
So what I'm hearing is there's some agreement that we can, all of us, and we can put out official notice, but then all of us can actively be reaching out to people that we think would be good steering committee members. Meanwhile, are we moving forward with getting some material for us to be ambassadors, anybody else to be, communicating for the broader committee appointments. And I know, it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg. Like, as soon as the steering committee is established, they can help clarify what that information would be. But, that these 5 to 7 people don't have to sit in a room and say, we want these 6 subcommittees. I think it can be a little broader than that. We have a pretty good sense. I mean, the comprehensive plan itself is broken up into chapters. Like there's one about housing, there's one, there's areas of interest that we know are going to be subcommittees, and we just may want to, highlight that, and that'll be reflected in how the subcommittees are really established. I think if we have a broad, like when you first started off and says we want people with this life experience, with this background, with the we want to have a diverse group of people, and I think inherent in that would be a diversity of interests. Maybe we can highlight a few of them to make sure, and maybe when we ask people to apply, the application can help them indicate where their areas of interest are.
So we want someone from planning. We have the mayor and myself, and then those 4 other people are regular community members.
And I'd like at least one of them to be bilingual, English, Spanish.
At least,
Person
yeah.
to be bilingual. That's basically what we're talking about. 4 people.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That can be very
else is
Yeah.
flexible.
Right.
Attorney, Tracy,
Gotcha.
they don't count as
Okay.
applicants.
And it is a mayoral appointment, but I don't have an idea of who all these people are, so it's going to be a group effort of finding all these people and building consensus on what we think is a good
And how many
reflection.
people have applied so far?
Oh,
15? Okay.
And I think Jeff actually left, but he was here, I don't know if he applied yet, but he.
yes, he told us he did, yeah.
With an interest in this. So we need to travel a little bit on a parallel path, like to get a bunch of people and get a room in the library and all that. We have to still, I know there was an ad, but nothing's perfect, I mean, honestly, but you gotta at least get something so that there's an education about what a plan is. Some people are interested, and like we saw them, we got the 61 applicants. They're like, I'm here, use me. I don't know, I like the environment, and I have some background in schools. I was on a school board in Brooklyn. I mean, so, but if you ask them, what subcommittee do you want to be on, it's uncomfortable, because, we saw that happen. So I just feel like we can actually go forward even from last time. I mean, I feel like, and I don't think we're gonna get everybody, but as you said, maybe we aim for 15, leaving 4 spots. I'm making up a number, 19, because I saw in one of the plans, like, the average is 19 members. Leave 4 empty in case we totally screwed up, until we messed up and left out an entire category of people that we weren't able to reach. So we'll leave some spots to be filled later, but I just feel like we should get going.
So I just want to say, like, with this graphic, like, subcommittees are in itself a life of their own. Like, whatever your particular passions are, or whatever you're interested in, that's over there. But I think now we have actually a clear understanding of what the subcommittee is going to do. So, really, we're talking about, hey, we're looking for 4 members to review comments, look at documents, right? Like, okay, after we do the engagement, right, we're looking for people to take all the information that was gathered from these subcommittees and be able to put them in a, some type of fashion. Like, based on what I'm seeing, is that there are clear things that this subcommittee is going to be doing. So I just think when we're advertising, we can be very clear about that, because there might be someone who says, you know what, yeah, I want to be on the committee, but I don't really want to review documents, right? I just want to focus on this, that, and the third.
Right.
So if this presentation has clear steps and clear roles that they're going to play, I think it's important to list those things.
And I think that's what we can take out for that message that the mayor talked about, is we can do this with some further delineation of the responsibility.
Typical roles and responsibilities, because I
Right.
think you did have in the write-up amount of time and commitment and all of that.
Well, yeah.
Do not put that on.
Just to add on to that, and to Mayor Garrity's point, so when we are at the new stage of, so after appointing the 5 to 7, when we are at the beginning stages, we had a discussion about whether it's the vendor, whether it's you and Jamie and Tracy, whatever the group is, that the draft and messaging would just come back to the board for for feedback, and then because I don't think that we should really. I'm making a big deal out of this because I feel like the education piece about this is so simple, just to get the buy-in and education about what we're doing and why this should apply, that that, I mean, and it's fine. We're moving forward now, but I think that ball should be rolling, because then we could actually go into the real outreach to get buy-in. There's no reason why we can't get 50 applicants for this subcommittee pool, especially if we actually do outreach that we normally don't do, and do it in the way that we discussed we would. Not easy, but it's possible. Even if we just get 5 each, I mean, that's not 50, but I don't think that the development of whatever you choose to do, whether it's a brochure or a poster or whatever, a card, it's finding an easy, understandable, plain English way.
And plain
Well,
Spanish.
and plain Spanish, of course, bilingual.
On the
For
front
people,
side, and English.
Yeah, like a one-sheeter in English,
yeah.
Backside is on Spanish,
Yeah.
or reverse, depending on what
Yeah.
group you're meeting with, and, yeah.
like before, now I can call it a launch meeting, because before we weren't calling it that, but now it's really a buy-in launch meeting, education meeting, right?
So people can apply to us, they don't have to go to the meeting.
Yeah.
Other people will have a chance to go to the meeting and decide, no, what? To
No, it's just
decide
that-
there whether they're interested or not.
The
or-
trouble with the meeting is,
Yeah.
the library wasn't available again until June 20th, and that is way too far away.
Place.
We could
Okay.
ask the high school. I mean, it's a public building, they're open. I mean, school districts are, I mean, I just don't
Sometimes,
understand.
yeah, I mean, we have, sometimes, it hasn't worked out so well,
What
so
about the
easily when
community
we've
center?
worked.
No
Why
The
not?
community center
I
could.
can't get a date unless I have a date.
So let's get some dates for the high school. There's parking, auditorium, or cafeteria, whatever.
So when do we think that we're going to be ready to do that, big presentation? And then, but I was thinking, like, we should each be able
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
Like, and I go to meetings all the time.
Yeah,
You
we
meet with
should-
people all
we
the
should
time.
start
Like,
it.
we can-
We should start it beforehand
I think
on our own,
yeah.
I think we're agreeing, and we should all go in, I think, with at least the same bullet points, so we're
Right.
saying the same thing. And when
Right.
people say, well, how many people on a committee? Well, the average will be, I mean, we have to have some bullet points that we
Right.
all can walk in with, but there also has to be one public place, so that when all of this, and we didn't reach, and somebody was out of town, there has to
Right.
be one place at one date that said, and if we didn't get to people, this is where they can go if we missed it.
So back to the timeline question, but now a much
End of March.
shorter question. To create the one-sheeter, and then we'll all review it and make sure it's still reflecting what we think it needs to. English and Spanish, and have, like, what is that? Is that 2 weeks? Is that 3 weeks? Because when that's ready, we should have the public meeting, and we should start filling our calendar.
This is a one-sheeter for the subcommittees.
Yes.
Yeah, so our main education outreach
Okay,
piece
gotcha,
will be
cool,
allowed.
cool.
So we need to make sure it's correct in English first, and then we can, thank you, and then we can have it translated. So it'll be circulated in English, and then we'll have it translated. This way, we know, that the two Spanish speakers here will know that that we all have agreed in English, which is however. you know.
Let's get a professional
And then-
translator. That's why it's not up to me.
and
Manny,
then-
'cause dialects and
And then we're gonna have
philosophy,
somebody
yeah.
translate it, but we can't, and then we have, if we decide to go with someone to design it, which I don't know, we have to talk about that, then when that happens, then we'll make it look the same, so that the back and the front look the same, just Spanish versus English.
The one thing about doing this outreach is that we don't really, I mean, this is what the steering committees could be or focus on, is that we're not really there yet to say, you want to be on the Natural Resources Committee. I mean, we need to get the
general.
steering committee set up, because they help focus that of really where we're going to move forward, because we're not going to get these
Yeah, I'm not even
subcommittees.
there yet. I'm still on the preliminary board outreach to either get them to apply through us and through their time,
Right.
or to
Yeah,
hack
that's
a
why I
meeting.
asked the
I
question.
also think you're being too literal, okay? You really are.
Okay.
These are, there'll be some committee on the environment, there'll be something on parking, and there will be more. It's an informational
Right, right.
session.
Right.
You don't need to do open space and, where is it, environment? Because frankly, those are basically, it's environmental issues, housing issues, taxation. Choose 5 things and more, because you're not actually asking people to show up and sign up for a subcommittee.
No,
You're
they're gonna
asking
get
people to
assigned, yeah.
come up to say, look, these are typically what I mean, if we have one more thing, neighborhoods, maybe people don't even understand what neighborhoods is, so maybe you throw that in, but 5, and the last bullet is, and more. Because it's just an informational session. It's not a literal, do you want to sign up
Right.
for housing? It's not what we're doing here in that informational session. Frankly, take half of that and you've got enough. already. I mean.
Yeah, we don't need to
you know.
reinvent the wheel. The DRWC had subcommittees,
Yeah.
there's a logic to them, those are born out of the conversations. And if you just look at the comp plan, it has chapters that are essentially subcommittees. So, but exactly what we're asking them to do, and I think it is important that, what are they being tasked with? They're going to be.
That's what
and-
Montel was saying.
Yes,
Sure.
But
completely agree.
back to Jamie's point, finding a date later on in the week is important because we need to actually have an outreach plan for that meeting as well.
So I just want to piggyback on what Tracy was saying. I mean, we're talking about these little single pagers, but we just really need to get the 4 people, like ASAP. Like the 4 people who are going to be on the steering committee, because yes, there's definitely going to be something on housing. There's definitely going to be something on, you know, the and more. But I thought that the most important part was when are we
Yes,
going
but
to
do you really need an entire outreach program with all of this?
I'm not
for-
talking about an outreach
No,
program.
I
he's
know,
saying,
you
he's saying,
don't.
let's appoint the steering
Like,
committee now, and they can be helpful
and they
in,
can be helpful
in
in
clarifying the outreach.
clarifying- yeah,
That's what I was trying to say, Quantel. Thank you.
So let's work backward. If we had an informational meeting on the last day of March, can we work backward from there about setting up the steering committee and getting stuff in both languages on one-sheeters and enough time for us to meet with organizations and people that we already know? And, I mean, is that enough time? I mean, you put a stake in the sand and you have to
In
keep it.
April?
We can't cancel it, okay? Because people get annoyed. I mean, you can cancel once, but you can't do it again.
Right.
Is March 30, I don't know. How
Let
many
me
days
look
is
at
I
the
think
la-
for
let me
us
look
to
the
really-
last week of March and the first week of April, just so that
Yeah,
I
I think
have.
April.
I think April
I
because
just like to
yeah.
get past, I think we all have to agree, get past the weather. There's
Yeah.
really no-
Right.
no- In April, it's rained, period.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's always some random storm in March. There's never a random storm in.
Yes.
We had 4 snowstorms in March, so who knows what's gonna happen in
So
April.
I think
Just
April's
put a
April's
date.
cool, but keep in mind though that the one thing that I would like rushed is that 1 pager, so then we
Yep.
get on our own
Okay.
start
That's
to.
But
fine.
that's what
So, and-
she's,
and I
that's
have
why she's
someone-
not agreeing with me for March.
okay.
She's pushing for April.
you.
Well,
That's the
I mean,
point.
I'm talking 4 days difference. I don't know
Okay.
between now and then.
Yeah,
Okay.
choose April Fool's Day. Love those days. Let's
my
eat
son's
That's a
birthday.
Sunday. I'm not going.
No, April Fool's Day is a Monday.
Oh, sorry.
My son will be
calendar's
turning
all-
11.
that is-
Oh, wow.
April 2nd is the village's birthday. We will be turning 205?
Wow.
206?
Do
Let me
something
try
for
my
that.
math here.
That would
206.
be kind of fun to do it
Yeah.
that night. So why don't I look
That
at
would be
it?
Well,
fun.
the town wouldn't
Yeah,
really
we could have
appreciate
birthday
that.
cake.
But
The first week or land use boards.
First week.
we can invite the
Get,
town.
you get later into
Mondays and
April, you
Tuesdays.
got the
Yeah.
whole
I'm
Passover.
gonna
Easter.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay.
That's why I was saying the
All
first
right.
week of April is ideal because there's a lot of breaks and what have you. So let me work with
So at least
that
you got
date.
something now.
That's what
Okay.
I have several days of that week to work with.
That Thursday,
There
the
we go.
4th is.
I have to look at my calendar.
If we
Oh, okay.
wanted to have stale
I
birthday
just,
cake.
we're gonna double check it with Tracy's calendar because she's got planning and zoning and HPC. she's-
HPC.
Whatever it is that works. I do think
If
Thursdays
we double
are-
book you, then you could just pick us.
Thursdays are generally better unless you know, we have to remember that there's people that work. So do we want to do it on a weekend? Is that an option? Do you want to do it on a Sunday afternoon, a Saturday? I don't know how, that's something that you should think about. That,
Well, I would like to do it in the evening, because both people that work and people that don't work can make it in evenings. People that work, I mean, although people have night jobs, I mean, you know, it's, you know, but there's a greater percentage of people that can hit both of that in those two.
Okay.
And it allows for commuters to participate, et cetera.
So realistically, if we're talking about using April to kind of push for the subcommittees,
April 8th is the only
there should be more than one, right? Like, there should be- that can be a
Wait, say that one more time?
process, right?
Well, you mean as far as the outreach?
Yes, yeah.
So I think what I was hearing is we'll do one big public televised, all the board of
Informational.
trustees is there, but then that same information, we don't even have to wait till April 2nd, 4th, whatever. But, you know, you can go to Star and say, I'd like to have, you know, I'm not telling you you have to go to Star, but you'll probably be there at some point in the spring. And, you know, you could go to an existing meeting. It's much easier if we can go to an existing meeting and say, can I have 10 minutes on the agenda?
use the same
I want
PowerPoint
everybody
that
to
we
know.
used.
Yes, and then we all use the same sheet and,
And
So
get
why
it
don't
out.
why don't we do this? Let's try to get the one sheet done in the next 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you have it, but this way you have it, we can push it out there, and then you have a date for people to come.
Right.
We're not trying to have the material done by the date of the meeting, and it looks like it very well might be April 8th, just because of the village's calendar.
oh, we
Maybe
just
take a
looked
look at your
calendar.
calendars and see if you're free while you're here.
Also, with the EAC and all the land use boards, could take 5 minutes on the agenda to talk about this.
Exactly,
And, I mean, you can
exactly,
do that.
yes.
You don't
Every,
need us
every
to do
meeting
that.
any of us has a connection with,
You know,
we should
right.
be asking
You're
to
at
be
the
on the
land
agenda.
use, you
10
put
minutes.
yourself on the agenda to say, I'd like to
Yeah.
let people know, and there'll be a
Yes.
bunch of people there.
Yes, any
So-
committee or group we're associated with.
So we could push it out that way. We just need, we have someone that we've engaged with that can help us write it, and we have someone that can design it, and there's other parts of it that we could talk about, that if we want to do something different at the meeting, we could talk about that in a different forum. But let's get the one sheet together, and then I think we have someone who can do the translation. The person that did the translation for us, if he's available, he did it during the meeting.
Yeah.
He also
yeah.
does it also. It's,
Certified translator, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's
If
good.
he's available to that meeting
Yeah.
too. So.
I mean, we can't use them a lot, because the professional translators charge 30 cents a word, so we have to really,
Really, they still do that?
they do
Jeez.
that, and you have to remember that. So if we're gonna do it with this, sorry? I know, career.
Okay,
Okay.
All right, so I will work on getting that with Tracy in the next 2 weeks, and then I will, at the same time, work on getting April 8th,
Great. That's a
which is
Monday.
a Monday.
The town will be happy.
Yeah, the only, just,
there's.
No
I think
cake.
I think one of the questions we're gonna get, so we
Maybe.
don't have to do the whole, is do you have to reside inside, the village of Ossining?
I think you have to have a personal stake. That's what we had, I believe, talked about in our little.
When we did the DRWC, that was, yeah, you had to have an
was the wording?
association,
Yeah, I
a
mean-
personal stake. You could
So you
work
could own
here,
a
you could,
business here, but
you
not
could have
live
kids
here.
that go in the school district and you feel very connected. Because, and the difference is, we have, in my mind, and this is how I talk to people about it, is land use boards are actually, and that's, the planning board and the zoning board and the EAC are the most strict about their residency requirements, because they're actually
Yeah.
interpreting and implementing the zoning codes. So it makes sense that they have they're empowered to actually say yes and no. This is an advisory committee. We're definitely residents, and we're the ones who are going to be approving anything. So
No,
I think
but
we can
I
be
think the
much more
question-
flexible.
I think the question is simply gonna come up.
Greater Ossining community.
Yes, with a very strong association, obviously, who else would want to do this?
So you may want to just review the 15 applications that have come in to see if there's somebody there
Sure.
that's of interest.
Well,
And I imagine everybody has at
Preferably
least one or two
town
people in their
village.
head, so.
Preferably town village. I mean, just saying. I mean,
Yeah, I think I don't think we have to worry about that, but there are people who maybe grew up in the village of Ossining and now live in the village of Briarcliff, and their kids go to school here and they own a business here, and, they are very knowledgeable and invested.
You will be subject to open meetings laws.
Yes.
Just please be advised.
What do you mean?
You're going to have to notice them, you're going to have to keep minutes, you're going to have to,
Yeah.
it's an open meeting situation, so, you have to
The
notice
comprehensive planning subcommittees?
them. They may well be if they're making determinations.
But they're not, they're just making recommendations.
Mayor, it's not as clear as just that. It doesn't just go by that, so they could conceivably be subject to open meetings. I'm just making that point. I'm not saying it's definite, but just please be aware.
How did you guys
wouldn't
do
mind
the
that, though.
downtown?
What?
Did you do it as
wouldn't mind
open
that.
meetings?
I mean, we met in the community center. It wasn't like we were meeting in somebody's basement in secret, but
Didn't we notice it?
I don't know.
I think we did.
We did when we had those meetings at
DWRC.
Kaya's office, for example, sure.
Yeah, yeah, those are noticed.
This comprehensive plan, I believe you would have open meetings law. This is the foundation for your zoning ordinance. So at least the steering committee, so you'll have minutes and notice the meetings, attendance.
good.
All righty.
Scars. 19 scars.
Scars?
What?
Scars?
What?
There's tools.
Was
Scars, the
not
next-
Tom.
Oh,
Okay.
Good night, Tracy.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, we can turn that off, I think.
Yes, please. Screens, and we need a new table. Hey, that's the word I
What?
Hey.
Peg? Oh, yes.
Screens and table. That's what I couldn't think of.
Yeah. Oh,
Microphone.
put some, those lights.
Oh, the screens. The town. I'll tell you later. Never mind.
Can you give us some
Yeah,
more
let's
lights
put
now? I
At
don't-
least those over there, you don't need, oh, no. That one's that's enough.
The
I'm gonna
perimeter.
put a big X on that one.
I'm not scared of the lights.
Okay, that looks good.
How are we doing, Tom? We good on, you can see us? Okay. All right,
All right, what
SCARs.
else do we got?
Okay,
This is
Next, we
quickie
have
quick.
on the agenda, this is at Tom's request, we have SCAR reviews for this year's small claims assessment reductions. There are 27, which total $13,728.58. One thing that, and Tom has noted, that $25,000 was set aside in the 2019 budget for SCAR's tax certiorari claims and other tax overlay items. SCAR refunds in 2018 aggregated just $2,179.60. Of the 27 SCAR petitions that were received, 24 were filed by those tax services. So that may explain why we've had so many. But what we would do is at next week's board meeting, we would present a resolution to approve these settlements, again, in the total sum of $13,728.58.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. HVAC upgrades?
And the last request is, if we had put in the capital budget to do HVAC upgrades to the police department's facilities, and we just need permission from the board to go out to bid and get that project moving.
Didn't we talk about that 2 days ago?
Like
Yeah, we approved that capital, yeah.
Last week.
Yeah, I thought,
Oh,
no, last week,
2 days ago.
2 days ago, no, we
mean,
did,
on Monday.
we
Because
did
the chief just talked
emergency.
about
No,
it,
that was
yeah.
the emergency.
That's not what this is?
No,
But this is different.
that was the
Yes.
power, this is
Oh.
different.
yeah.
Yeah, this is different,
that.
yeah, this is the
Not
HVAC.
Thanks, Manny.
It wasn't
No,
the,
no, like I've seen this for 2 years already.
No, I know.
Part of
Is
the
it,
capital projects,
it was
though.
part of the capital project.
The one that we
Oh,
bought
now we're,
2
now
weeks,
we're actually,
4 weeks ago,
We're
yeah.
gonna
Never
need
bid this
permission
yet.
to go out to bid
All
and
right.
start the project.
so you're putting it on for next week, right?
Yeah, this is going out to bid, though.
is it,
This
didn't
is-
we just do
already
the air
approved.
conditioning in the courthouse?
That was
we just do
2
the air
years
condition-
ago.
Wasn't that separate
No.
though?
Part of an HVAC system.
It's,
There was,
Ack.
it's the act of the HVAC.
I feel like I've been seeing this for 2 straight years now.
Okay, well,
yeah, it's been on the capital.
maybe
plan
we can,
for 2
maybe we can, yeah. But I do want to know what's the difference between that, because there was like a big
Yeah.
thing with the air conditioning in the courthouse. It
I'll
was
ask.
like,
You know, we can check with, we'll check with Andy, because that would
yeah,
have been
before
under
next
his-
week, just so
would
we
have been
under,
his
because
auspices.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we're not buying the same thing twice. I just am
Right.
curious as to why this seems so confusing.
Okay. That's
All
it.
right.
Do we need to go into exec for matters of personnel related?
Not
to
personnel, but
person-
matters of litigation, if we
Matters
might.
of-
Oh, okay.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We look forward to next week's meeting. We will be back at the courthouse, whatever date that is, sometime in March. This meeting is adjourned.